Well, that's great. That's great. Well, Seven, just once again, before we start our discussion, I just wanted to thank you very much for the work that you do and for taking this call with me tonight. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I am just a regular guy, and I started doing some research about maybe 10 years ago, specifically into some of the situations that are going on globally. And of course, as you know, it's quite the rabbit hole. So maybe you start on the outskirts of the rabbit hole and then you start working your way in. And so I've just been learning from some very great teachers, people that I respect, and just trying to collect information that has inspired me and that has helped me raise my awareness. And then all I'm trying to do is just pass that information forward to other people. And I'm actually kind of glad that tonight we get to have this conversation without any commercial interruptions. We can go as long as we need to get this message out clearly to people. And so I'm very excited to be with you. So just once again, thanks for coming on with me today.
Oh man, I mean, the pleasure is definitely on mine. Obviously, it's something that I really want to do more than anything is expand consciousness. And just even for me to have the opportunity to do that is more than thanks enough. So again, I just, passing the thanks back and just saying, thanks for making yourself available and being present. And that's, I guess, all that's necessary these days to really get some expansion going on. So obviously during this conversation is going to get I get a little excited, especially about the message. It does have that kind of power attached to it. And I think that it will be something new for everyone. There will be something new in here. But like, as I said, it should ring just as familiar as any truth. I'll say it like that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And you know what? In reviewing the notes for tonight's discussion, I'm very excited about these specific topics that we sort of selected. And I grew up originally I was actually raised in a very fundamentalist Christian background. And I was very much as a young child in a prison of fear and guilt. And there was a lot of other factors involved. And so at a very young age, I personally was forced to either lose my mind, basically, or go out and actually search for some true answers that made sense to me. Because for whatever reason, the information that I was given, it didn't resonate with me, even as a child. And even though everybody around me was trying to force and impose a particular perspective on me, I don't know what it was, but maybe it was just coming from within. There was just this voice that just kept telling me to keep seeking and keep searching. And I just kept doing that, and I've never stopped doing it. And so to speak with someone such as yourself that has such an in-depth knowledge of all the different dimensional aspects of this, which is very, very interesting, where we're not just focusing on only the physical, we're bringing all those other elements in. And that's what I really appreciate about your work. And so I'm very excited to get into that with you today. And I guess we should start off with, when you look around at the world and the situation that people are in, we've got a world where everything seems to be inverted. It's presented in a particular way to sort of appeal to people's conscious and subconscious, but at the same time, it's the inversion of truth. And nothing is more obvious than actually even the language that we use, the language that is used in the media, the language that is used by the politicians or the world leaders, the language that is used especially in religion. So maybe we can get into like the etymology and understanding, how they're communicating with us and how it's inverted and kind of maybe go from there.
For sure. I mean, it's definitely, it feels like home going into the etymology subject, because that's a major part of how I began this level expansion for myself, as the words began to come to pieces as I often see them as just parts of an explanation, but never the whole thing. But first, even before we get into etymology, I just really want to talk about also just when you see anything in this reality, because obviously we've got to tear this thing entirely down tonight, and then we got to build it back up, which is the best way to do anything, because that way we can see how it works, and then we can see why it's working the way that it is right now. And I think that what would get us into that is really first talking about how everything that you see in the reality that is powerful is designed like the body. So whether it's a government, whether it's a hierarchy, whether it's a corporation, also known as an entity, all of the designs that you see behind complex structure in this world, especially if anything's supposed to endure, it's designed after the body. And this comes from really just men of wisdom that would look at the body and see that because it continues to run, because it has long life, because it's so fascinating, because there's many riddles about the body that we don't understand, just even us being here, that if we model things after the body, then we will come to some level of success and we would actually connect ourselves with something greater. So the beginning of all of the knowledge begins with the body and the understanding of self. What we get after language is created and things of that nature is wholly subject to what exactly alphabet or the cabal really means. And what that really means is that that first letter of the alphabet is supposed to connect to the last letter of the alphabet like a cable or cabal. It's actually the same word. And this cable, like if you can imagine the front of a cable and the back of the cable and then connecting them, you can see it makes like a circle or a ring or a disc. And so this is automatically to insinuate that all language is something of a disc or information database that goes into the mind and begins to spin. And then from that spin, it begins to generate the things that are associated with it. So when a person is saying things, and we were even talking about this deeply yesterday, about when a person is speaking, they're breathing out carbon. And because carbon is such a major component to bringing anything into existence in a physical reality, you could just go check your science books about what they say about carbon, 666, 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, etc. Then you can see even from that level why when people say something, it has a level of manifestation or power to it of something that could occur in three-dimensional reality. And then the only thing that would weigh if this occurred right away or if this is something that took a long time was more or less the will or the intention behind the words when they were spoken by the individual. So generally if someone says, "Ooh, I'm going to really get that job," then they seem to get the job more so than the person that says, "Hopefully I get the job." So all of that is that's the conducting of energy and how fast we're able to actually manifest something. Now, of course, there's many monkey wrenches in the game, which we'll talk about during this conversation, which is what happens when you're saying words, which are worlds, and all of a sudden, what you think that you're saying and what you think that you want to manifest, you actually are not even getting close to saying the tones, the rhythms, the vibrations that are associated with that. And so that, of course, gets us into the deeper parts of this, which is where does that inversion come from? How, when we say something, do we even almost ask for opposite than what we truly intend? And obviously today we would have to get into the mother church, or basically the surrogate mother Cersei, and how religions are set up to actually make a person not think. We'll have to get into exactly who created this particular language and what it's created for. And actually, we can actually start there. If we think about language, we have to understand that now language is based on writing, of course. Writing is based on spelling. The spell is just a word used within magical practice. There is a writ, as you see in the word writing. That's often used in magical practices as the word ritual. You have curses or cursive. And you can automatically remember your teacher standing over you, making sure you do the cursive writing right. So what we have is basically a complex system that, while everyone's looking to MK Ultra and everyone's looking to all of these different newer versions of subtle mind control, the original firmware program is not even being examined at all. Meaning, why is it that we're choosing to use 26 characters in our language? Like, why not 30? Why not 50? And does it have any significance? And when we start to ask questions like that, just not chumping these people off for lack of better terms, but and saying, "Oh, they're stupid. They don't know how to do things. They're evil." Let's look at deeper and see, well, why is it that they're doing things this way? Is it based on some kind of firmware or hardware or system that we're actually running on that controls us and that we need to know about if we're ever to break our way out of the pin? So what happens is that if you ask yourself that question, you'll find out that 26 is a very significant number because when you take 26 and you times it by 2, you get 52. And anytime you start seeing these numbers, you realize that you're dealing with even what modern day calls the tarot. Because, of course, the modern card deck is modeled after the tarot, and there's 52 cards. But there's also, the tarot is modeled after astronomy. So there's also 52 weeks in a year. So what you start to begin to divine after a while is that it's highly possible that the English language is only halfway revealing itself, meaning that you have half of a circle of a disc. Because remember, we talked about earlier how most languages, they connect from the beginning to the end as if they're like a circle. But here we have a language with the English language where it's basically half of a circle. And trying to get half of a circle to turn and cycle in your mind or in a system that is completely cubic, cylindrical from that nature, it's going to be very difficult for it to occur. And so what we find is that, again, we're speaking these words and we're engaging in speech and we're letting it take us to multiple levels. And this is where, if you remember in the biblical text, it says the tongue and the mouth really is what was being spoke of, is really the most dangerous organ, most powerful organ in many sense, that it can set the whole body ablaze. That's what the actual scripture says. But what it's saying is, on multiple levels, is as above, so below. What you're actually saying pretty much determines what you do during the day now. What you put in your mouth determines how your whole body feels. So in every tense, what goes on in this top part of the body is what is going on in heaven. Because every single thing from an operating standpoint, and especially in one of the major internal or portal points of our body, is in the head. So we have our nose in our mouth, which we take in the breath. We have our ears where we take in the sound. We have our mouth where we take in, again, the food. And so these particular orifices, if you start to map out the body as in itself being a universe, not just a map of the universe, you start to see that what we're really dealing with here is a war. A war from our lower body, and this is hidden within the riddle of Michael fighting the dragon, but it's really Michael, or the Birdman, the angel, the higher state of consciousness, above the head, above the water, warring against the ideas and the urges from the lower body. Nothing external. And so, getting back to the beginning of this conversation, when we talk about this interpolation, when we ask ourselves, where did it really come from? It came from the actual inversion of the spiritual scripture. All religion that you see now has defaced the scripture. Especially, it literally defaced it, taken off the face of who is the mystery person that they're talking about in Helios Biblia, or the Holy Bible, but Helios Biblia meaning the Sun Book. Where did this Sun Book come from, and where is the originals, and does this bear any witness to the originals? We get deeper into finding, especially because of the Abrahamic tradition spreading into all religions, if you study them deeply, that Abraham is synonymous with Abraham, and Sarah is synonymous with Brahman's wife, Saraswati. So there we have Genesis and the major characters encased as the beginning of a Hindu book. But then when you speed all the way to the end of the book, to Revelations, we find that Revelations is written as another Hindu text about the 7 chakras. Of course, the 7 churches of the 7 chakras. The seals that break the seals that are broken open, none of them by Kundalini rising up through the body and activating the higher senses. So it wasn't put together by John on the island of Patmos, is what I'm telling everyone. It was actually put together by Apollonius of Tyana. Now, this kind of knowledge was well known for a while. So before we entered the Dark Ages, everyone already knew, because they were connected with nature, what the truth was. So this is why you get the original faction that is causing most of the problems as becoming what they call Mother Church, why they take the role of basically a man in a skirt, a surrogate mother. And it's because they are trying to emulate first, before they deliver the sun god myth, they had to emulate nature because that's what everyone was eating from. It was like you couldn't really get into rhetoric and reason with people back in the day. They wanted to know where their food was coming from. And that is what they gave their attention and time and energy into, so they can keep that going, just like anyone with some sense. So they didn't desecrate the world and act like the world is dying and dead and in sin and needs to be punished and all of that. That would be like destroying your foundation that you had to stand on. It was almost insanity. So do you see how back in the old days, some of the concepts and the topics that we believe in so heavy, as far as the millions of people believe in, won't make any sense because they don't have a slew of things that we have and we're presented with right now, as far as a simulation or synthetic things that are fake, things that can bring you happiness but have nothing to do with your actual real happiness, overall health, etc. And so what we get into then is we find that there is a perpetrator. There is something that is back there that's driving humanity into what would be oblivion if what is already occurring now was not taking place. There is a stage and multiple stages of activation that many people are participating right now that supersede things like the date of 2012 passing. There is a massive level of expansion reaching many people on the planet right now, and it's about to spread even more. So that's just what's happening. But we do at times have to reflect. That's what we'll literally be doing. Reflect back to the past and see exactly how this is put together so that we understand how to get other people out of this situation. So what was occurring is that, again, this indigenous knowledge about how the earth works, how celestial bodies work, how other glands that are calcified, we don't use anymore, etc., work. That was the knowledge and the information that if anyone tried to write down, that's what they were writing down. So it would take an entirely different regime to come through to get rid of all of that information. So when they first entered with the knowledge, they entered as mothers and bringing forth knowledge of herbs, bringing forth knowledge of different miraculous powers and potions from nature. And that's how what you're calling Jesuits, what you're calling the Vatican, etc., those factions got their foothold. But as time began to pass, they were still losing too many followers in this foolishness. Because there's one thing that happens when someone starts to explain to you about the herbs and the healing things in nature and how nature works. You eventually see very fast that, well, shoot, the person that's telling me is not the one that is generating all of the power. It's nature. Thanks for telling me. I'm going to nature. So in the beginning days of this church, as they're calling this surrogate church, they were still so close to the doctrine of nature that they had to choose to move away from that because it was still not serving the purpose. So this is why now we have a God that is way in heaven. He's everything but where we are. And he's anyone but us. And even a different species, like I'm in this world but not of this world. So where are you from?
Yeah.
Like that's the ultimate act of separatism right there. When you say I'm not of something, seeing that you're supposed to be everything. Wasn't that you just said God was everything? So do you see how if you choose to believe in it, and this is what many people have found themselves in the trap, if you try to make sense of foolishness, that's why they always say man's wisdom is foolishness to God. God, again, being the supreme or apex human being. Then you start to see that all these are riddles where they're really telling the truth, but you would need to dig a little bit deeper into the actual literal meaning, meaning of the words, actually transcending something more than just the literal text, but transcending into something that is the real spiritual connection. And that gets us into the next subject. That gets us into how is it that, okay, all of what you're saying sounds great. You're basically saying that man and woman are universes and that we've been duped because we've accepted language and many other things that have disempowered us. Okay. But how is it working under the framework of them being able to contrive such a myth and keep it going for so long? Like, how is it working? And so we find that there are oaths, bindings, pacts, and rituals taking place all the time that we're agreeing to. And a major part of that starts, of course, when we're younger, especially just in school. So we see the right hand is placed over the heart. This is the beginning of the ritual. And one is to pledge allegiance, meaning to say that everything that they are and what they're about is now at the disposal of this flag of 50, at least that was then, pentagrams. And because the pentagram in itself, like the first thing that any alien would do if they landed on the planet and start seeing all these pentagrams around here, they would say, well, what does this symbol mean that everyone is using? And then still what you would find is that every person that you ask, oh, it just means a star. But when you really get deep into the occultism, spirituality, realm dynamics, geometry, etc., you find out that the pentagram is the symbol of the actual geometry that it takes to trap or pin in a spiritual being inside of a physical or fire-like body, a slower vibratory frequency. Because what we're dealing with is, now you see the sun way out there. Let's just take that as an instance, even though it's not good to use too many external objects if you're looking for the truth of what's going on inside. But if you see the sun out there, it's really far out there. But every single thing that is in between would then be an emanation from it. Like as we get further away from the sun, things start to coalesce more and slow down their vibration. As they get closer to the sun, they actually move into another vibratory frequency that is not visible by the eye. And the reason why that I'm pointing this out is that we have to begin to see that when they call this symbol the blazing star, what they're talking about is one of the deepest levels of cosmogony that was ever uncovered on this planet, which was how we got into physical bodies and what they really are. And how that ties into our urges, meaning fire in Chaldean, and how that same fire, or what we call passion and desire, is basically turning this world and powering this world as if it was combustion. And this is why you see the pentagram in the ancient Chinese and Oriental systems before you ever see it make it to the flag in a new country like United States. They're still using the old system. But this system, if you understand how it works, then the pentagram only becomes, or the body only becomes a trap when you don't know how to get out of it. Anything only becomes a trap when you don't know how to get out of it. Anytime before then, it's a vehicle. Even if it's a cage, it's a protection unless you can get out of it. Notice how if you go into a really tough neighborhood and then you're in a house and it has a cage up around it, then that's going to keep everything out. But it will be a prison to you if for some reason you can't unlock the gate and get out yourself. Yeah. Other than that, it's like your protection. So what I want to introduce people to today is the end of dualism, because that's, of course, much of this combustive power in the wrong direction is based on dualism. But we're trying to simplify or solve, meaning soul, the sun. We're trying to solve all of these hindrances and these breaks in our understanding of exactly what's taking place in not only the universe, but also the universe. So when you're dealing with the pentagram as a symbol, you're saying volumes of information. It doesn't mean it's the supreme, because it's still a piece. In fact, it's the ultimate epitome of peace. Like it's combustion, so it's continuously dividing itself. Notice how in the reality we have thousands of trees, thousands of insects. Everything here is about division. So you have to see in this kind of planet, what is causing division? Where's the machine that's doing that per se? And what we'll find is that the pentagram in itself as a symbol symbolizes the combustion that takes place when wood is trying to beat water. Water is trying to beat fire. Fire is trying to beat. You see this whole Power Ranger approach to the entire reality. You see, power is in there because the symbol itself equals power, but what kind? And this is always what naive beings may fail to ask the question of, like, if someone offers you immortality, not asking yourself if you're just already immortal and they're giving you something that you already have. You see what I mean? Yeah. Or when you're trying to decipher a symbol, getting multiple explanations of something that still would take volumes to speak on, but someone's resolved it in something like 2 or 3 seconds, just as something simple or non-connected to things. And so this is what I mean by a universe because a universe is a university, right? It's a place that you learn, right? So whenever we're tired of learning, it doesn't matter because we're still in a university. But the other key to this word universe is that it's uni, which means united, and verse, which means against. How does this work? It means the word itself is even an oxymoron. It's combusting and tumbling upon itself. But what it's really saying is united, just like the body, because the body is the real universe, but in conflict, because surely the liver is not the heart is not the spleen, and then there's always a war because the mouth may eat something or drink something that totally infuriates the liver. The eyes may see something that calls the gonads or the lower areas of the body to burn up in passion rather than burning up the byproducts of waste that they put in their body from food and things. So do you see, it's like we're literally in this magnificent vehicle greater than anything that we've ever created, especially iPhone 4 or 5 or Galaxy S4 or any of these devices. Something that we're living in, we're even creating in, but we don't even know the entire process to. Why not look into that? And I know that may be skipping the title or subject a little bit on that line, but why not look into ourselves to actually find out what is really going on here, but really do it based on some kind of system. And so that's, of course, what we're introducing today, but it won't be an introduction as if it's something new. It'll be ancient knowledge restoring itself to its proper place inside of a person. So I'm going to definitely let you to build a little bit, man. I know I get on these tangents about it, and we can get a lot more specific about some of the stuff that I mentioned, even because I may skip over things lightly. But yeah, man, there's no time limits.
Oh yeah, no, that's great, and I love when someone gets passionate and goes on. I mean, I'm a student of learning too, and I'm just loving this because my mind's going in all kinds of directions. So this is great. One of the things I wanted to bring up, I guess, talking about the pentagram, was that I've always just seen it as a symbol, but it's, I guess what you're saying is it's how that symbol is used. I mean, and maybe we can get more specific because there's people that would say, okay, well, if you have the 3 points of the pentagram pointing upwards, then the symbol is, of course, a positive symbol. But then when you have it inverted, as in like, Luciferianism, Satanism, or whatever, then you have the inverted pentagram, which everybody thinks of as being the negative, right? So
right.
maybe we can dissect that a little bit more, because maybe that's just basic.
Let me elaborate on that, because that's exactly what I was talking about with these one-line explanations that these new people are giving, and they have no clue of what they're talking about as far as what it's really about, right? Because think about it. Now, the geometry based on it is 72 degrees. Like when you look at the distance between each line in the star is 72 degrees. It's 5 of them, so when you take 72 degrees times 5, you get 360. So that's 360 degrees, a perfect circle. So somehow this becomes a straight line way of making a circle, which is sometimes known as squaring the circle. It's finding ways to trap something that is already superfluous. Like, remember, everything that's related to nature doesn't build in straight lines. Or feels everything that's connected with the higher states of consciousness as far as light waves and spectrums concerned are moving like cones and spirals and things of that nature. They don't have straight lines. So in every tense, what we're talking about with this symbol is we're talking about, again, volumes of information. But what we're also saying is that notice how it connects more than it does with a perfect circle than it with phi, This is the quotient of math that is supposed to produce the most puzzling riddles, okay? And this is because if you think about the human being is the quotient that produces the most puzzling riddles. So you see how they start already tying this symbol into man, that which is what Da Vinci drew out. He was closed-lipped because he had already discovered it and what was going on and why they were utilizing this particular symbol, because they had come into the knowledge of how to put spirits into fleshly vehicles. This was PlayStation for these ancient beings. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They were already figuring out, like, how did you get the goat? How did you get the dog? How did you get all of these different entities, and what made them in these different measures? And that's what the secret of the Sphinx is. The 4 elements is in the riddle of the Sphinx. So when you see the different composite beings that are there, they symbolize the four elements. Now, you see this four elements also with the four angels: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the Kaaba, the Tetragrammaton. All of these different traditions that you see in what is the religious structure of today are based on the four fathers, or that structure of four, or what is also known as the door. As you see, they rhyme. So this is how you can start to take, if you really understand numbers, if you really understand these letters for what they are, you could take them completely apart and basically reverse engineer exactly how this particular reality was created. So then when you know the way in, you also know the way out. So to me personally, there's nothing that I really shy away from as far as understanding it. But that doesn't mean that I got to go and worship it and draw it on the ground and do all sorts of weird stuff with it, because now you're into the external version. And this is the main thing that we're dealing with here. So if I tell you that I can take this thing down and bring it back up in 3 days, or meaning that I can actually go into a state of meditation, that I will completely dissolve most of my identification with self, and then completely re-access another side, a more harmonic side of myself, then that starts to make sense more so than some external character that is actually leaving it, coming and going in and out of worlds to save helpless beings. And so you can see how the entire structure, again, of religion is built to disempower by first introducing the character known as God. Once we're looking outside for something, again, that's inside, that's the first level of disempowerment. So once again, we have still, more so than spiritual entities, physical men that have aligned themselves with perpetuating this lie of who we are. And hopefully, again, in this conversation also, since we don't have really any time limits, I get to a point where I transcend even that I'm talking on this microphone and that we're recording and whatever. And we can start getting into, just as we're talking as friends, because realistically, I would speak directly to you rather than anyone that I can't see. Those are fans and viewers and things like that. I don't know who would see, so I can't picture them. That's in the future. But right now with you, I would be interested in giving you the information so that you know. Now, first of all, let's talk about merging senses, how to actually become this hyperdimensional super conscious being. The first thing you're going to need to do is, now, you can remember things that have happened in the past when you were a child, right? Mm-hmm. And then even if you go to be something like, let's say, an architect, and you start designing a building, you can visualize that building and what it's supposed to be, and then as it gets built, it will, in the future, it will eventually be a building, okay? So this shows you that the past and the future can be actually collapsed into the present if you knew that there's no such thing as time. So that means that even the energy that you would gain 100 parsecs from now, you actually have access to right now, as long as you can collapse the fields of time. Now, the fields of time are actually like bands or layers. This is kind of synonymous with Saturn's rings. You see this continuous rings around that. It's called a girdle, right? And in many tenses, the languages are like rings. That's why they call it the Lord of the Rings. There's the Elven script, which is really Sanskrit, written over the ring. Because what it's saying is that once you master one language of power, then, or one system of power, like if you went into, I know that you're in the martial arts, and you mastered that system, and you're truly dedicated to that system where it transcends falsehood, you'll start seeing the connections with that in everything. What's really required for most people is for them just to get whatever they're doing, for them to just be serious about it, because they're going to eventually get to the point where they're going to see what the real truth is here. Now, this is, of course, the demarcation with spirituality is you have people that are serious about spirituality, and you have people that are just browsing. And then those people that are serious about spirituality, you have people that are serious about doing negative and dark things, and you have people that are serious about expanding themselves into higher levels of consciousness. And this becomes then like a tree of multiple paths that different people are taking, intersecting at different points to teach each other lessons. So I would say in every tense, and let me just rewind here again to not get just ahead of myself, that I'm telling you 100%, if there's anything that you leave from this conversation today, know that you did not forsake yourself, meaning that you actually didn't leave yourself stranded in this situation, that you may find yourself to be in right now, because you put yourself inside of what is necessary to get you to where you need to go. Meaning that because the body still does contain the ability to become a launch pad for the soul and several mental bodies, it always means that this is an optimistic situation going on here, no matter how it may seem. You're immortal, so you can't die. The worst thing that can happen here is that they can kill you. So even the worst thing to the universe is actually not the worst thing. It's a part of something that we invented. Now, when I say we, it's because man's law holds over, man and woman's law holds over other men and women. This means that if another man makes a law and we agree to be aligned with that man, then that law holds for us because we're all of the same species. Now, in Earth, all of the animals are under the law of the earth, not man. That's why when the seasons change, man's not responsible for it getting cold and getting hot, even though they want to love to play with that right now. It's only to thwart something that's already occurring, not to actually originate it. So what we're dealing with is that there are several cosmic vibrations and emanations that are coming from not only Earth, but other celestial bodies such as the moon and other bodies in our proximity that are actually influencing most things that are operating in the animal state of consciousness, which of course is below the neck. The head itself is the globe of the body. It's the real planet. Everything else is more or less attachments of animal bodies. You can figure something like Voltron in this tense, where we add on senses. That's why there's these 5 attachments. We're adding on senses of animalistic traits. So the sight of a bird, the actual speed of a serpent, the actual so you see how this, again, like I said, the PlayStation comes to mind here, because now we have individuals that know how to take the essence of other living life forms and gain those essences and then call them senses. Okay, so the reason why we see, hear, taste, smell, touch on Earth is because we have a vehicle, i.e. a body, that is organic, that sees, hear, taste, smell, touch. And when we come into it from this, from the entry gate, the entry point on this North Pole, when we come into it and sit into the seat of where you see the control panel, the pineal, all of the different refracting mirrors and the holographic stuff that we're yet to invent right now or give to the masses. But again, when you're sitting into the seat of that, now you're in this 5-dimensional vehicle enjoying a reality that in the beginning, if you think about how Earth works, if you were running around the forest and you saw something that you wanted to eat, you would get in and eat it there. And even if you wanted to take it back to the village with you, you could take a seed from it and go back to the village and plant that seed and it will grow infinitely. I mean, what's better than that? If you liked a particular animal or species that was here, because all species that are under man are still subspecies, and because man and woman were sitting at an apex sense, those entities wanted to be around man. So all of the animals that you see here on the planet and birds and things wanted to be around man and woman. So you would never basically have to put something in a cage just in order to see it, right? So we're dealing with just reverse engineering what had to happen. Like this whole concept of us all coming from the same source is not something that people need to fight with believing in. It's in common sense. If I go to your grandmother and then I go to her grandmother and her great-great-grandmother and I keep going back, eventually I'm going to get back to a village. If I keep going back, eventually I'm going to get back to a person. Even those two people mating, I'm eventually get back to what is called an androgynon now in our world, but is really what we call God. Meaning that our original state as God is as an entity that actually has a masculine and feminine component in harmony inside of themselves. And to bring anything forth from you is very easy, because that's called immaculate conception. There's no external sex that needs to take place, meaning that's why external sex is sometimes seen as in itself not astrally clean, because there was an internal sex, which of course ancient man in the Orient was familiar with, known as the homunculus or the golden lotus, where this inception, which is it's internal, not conception, which is external. This inception could take place where you're birthing things on an inner world, your world, the only world that you have control of. And this vista is easily accessible by one who has the refracting third eye, because when they close their eyes, instead of seeing that black field there, known as the abyss, they actually see a fully lit up world designed the way that they put into their mind's eye. So it would be very difficult for you to be upset if you had this physical body that you were able to travel around into this reality and pretty much enjoy all the things that were here because and create things. Then when you decided to go into this inner reality, you had all these other vistas, almost as if they were on discs, worlds like Mist and worlds like Halo and Riven and, all these different worlds that you had that you could step into because your memory or your Emmy was intact. Your disc was not broke. Notice how in the movie Tron, the discs are the most important thing. Your memory is the most important thing. So it's easy for, especially the child, to go into make-believe because the memory that the soul has already created everything. Meaning that the soul doesn't need any knowledge. It's just being, basically. And this is because it knows how to create a body. It knows how to get from one place to another. And so just the whole desperation, I have this saying, I call it the day after ascension. When we finally get away from this whole who's watching me? What are they doing? What are they going to do this to us? When is that going to happen? Oh my goodness, I got to protect. And man, I just want to expand. And this is ridiculous. And I wonder if it's the aliens. And so when we get away from all of that, there is something else that's going to be on our minds then. So I've moved also to that point really in my state of consciousness. As I said, you can collapse past and future. I know this will eventually be over just as soon as anything impure always disintegrates in the face of higher vibratory frequency. The high vibratory frequency is always subject to decay, so thus it will pass away. What will remain is the truth, because the truth does not pass away. If you associate yourself with truth, then you will survive also. And surviving then means a state of consciousness, not whether you'll actually be alive or not. You may be grass on a lawn in some sense, or because many people are thinking like grass on the lawn is what I'm saying, or you may be a super sentient being that's actually using the equipment that you've already been bestowed with as a gift. And we're not even still talking about the physical body in this sense. We're talking about the soul. So again, the actual rewards and the gestures of kindness that have been given from what we're still calling aliens or beings that we can't identify has really always been positive. The only reason why we can't see them is because they're moving above the speed of light. Anything that is below the speed of light, i.e. flesh, this lower dense vibratory frequency, can be easily seen with two eyes. Now we're moving, so to move from there, we move into this seven, or what we call a seven, or six or seven sense being. What does it mean to have, what's going to happen next? Not what does it mean, forget that. What is this next sense that we're supposed to have then? If we have five senses already, what is the next stage for mankind and woman? I'll tell you the next stage is that when you go into the next vibration, sight and sound collapse upon themselves and they become the same thing. So then from there, what you're doing is like hear-seeing. And the reason why this becomes important is because it has everything to do with how time collapses. Because everything that makes a sound, if you see a sound as like a tube, you can see it. So thus you can travel to it. And I want to make this very clear to people. When you move into higher vibratory frequencies, you don't have the actual dense physical body anymore. So you're able to compress yourself into a minuscule and move through the tube of the sound of where it is that, or what's actually making a noise that is attracting you to discover what it is. So this is what the higher sense entails, and this is why there's so much information associated with that tapping into the higher frequencies, because you literally begin to open up portals to the truth. There becomes a throughput between you and information. And so, it's quite amazing, again, once you can begin to visualize that, again, the body is a universe. The only knowledge that is being hidden, the only secret that is being kept here on this planet is about humanity actually being in themselves individually universes. And that's the truth. However long it takes for that truth to get to humanity is how long they're going to actually be here. Because that has a lot to do with their will, their encouragement, and everything. Because if they're telling a person, well, you're a human, and humans are, born in error and all the rest of what they come with, and that also media does the new job of it. That's why they were rushing to erect this new media stream. And so now everyone is fake and superficial. So when a person looks at themselves and they say, well, I'm not like Kardashian, and we're just talking about the masses here. I'm not like her, so and then they feel like they're somewhat demoted, even though they've set basically a demigod over them, because there's nothing about Kardashian that has anything to do with massive levels of spirituality. That's just the truth. So what happens is when a person has been debased like that, then they can get put under dominion, and that's why. That's again in the animal sense world. That's why the Latin word for Sunday is Domingo, because they change up all the concepts of who the sun god is. To go back to what I was talking about earlier, when they had the mother church, and the mother church concept, Mother Circe, wasn't working for them. Like I said, men in dresses with wigs on wasn't working. They decided to let's make it a little further away. Let's make it the sun, something that people can't not get to according to what they think, and they'll definitely have to go inside to get it. So that's when this whole idea of the sun god and the sun god myth was taken on the external level and was born. And then from that point on, people had really no ground, because you see, if you move the mother concept of the universal mother out of people's mind, nature out of their mind, they have no ground, they have no foundation. And then what this means in the physical world, how it manifests on the physical reality, is that you really don't have the means and the things that are necessary to get your ideas off the launch pad. Even your children or your seeds, more than anything, your actual seeds, your ideas, you can't get them to grow because they're on infertile ground. And so this is obviously, it's very open-ended as far as the topic and how much can be discussed. If you really want to, again, pinpoint something, I can do that, or I can keep just building on this until the point where we completely circle it, and then we can start to talk about it more. Because obviously what I'm saying some parts may make a lot of sense, and then other parts may not make any sense at all. And I always tell people, I encourage them to make some sense out of it or see if it's the truth, because if you say that you're on this level, right, and you're going to another level, i.e. ascension, as they've used the term, right, then if you get to the next level and everything there you understand and everything there looks like basically the previous level, then you're not on the next level. You're actually on that same level, but just in another expanded part of it. A next level means that you're getting something or hearing something that you never may have heard before. Now, of course, there's a great conceit with people thinking that they know everything, which is actually the end to all real energy. All real energy is perpetual. That perpetual energy exists on ideas. When your ideas can power you, meaning you feel so enthusiastic about what you're about to do, then you've basically got into the great arcana, meaning you've got into the actual fuel that you can generate yourself. And I'll talk a little bit about that fuel. And again, maybe going everywhere here, but just bear with me. That fuel is associated with, in every way, excuse me, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but the perpetual fuel, which is not fuel for cars and not fuel for buildings, but fuels for the body. That perpetual fuel in itself is what we can lock onto, which is our ideas and our will. Now, let me show you how this really works. If a person wins the lottery, right? They haven't given the money to them yet, but they buy the ticket, they look at the program, and then they call out their number. That person then is going to get so excited and have so much energy that they probably won't sleep that night. I'm calling everyone, hey, man, I won the lottery. Yeah, man, it was me. I was at the liquor store. I was going to get something for Jane. You see, so now this idea, because they haven't got the money yet. So this idea of winning the lottery and changing their lives and all that is motivating them enough for them to actually have physical power. So what if you could simulate this for yourself, that you can actually take your ideas and begin to allow them to drive your vehicle. Now, the way this works is that you have to move away from the more fleshly or dense side of energy and giving that level of energy to the body. And of course, that has a lot to do with the eating meat. That has a lot to do with eating the artificial foods, of course. But basically anything that if you're feeding the lower body more than the upper body, which the upper body eats essence, eats crystals, eats knowledge, eats all of the stuff that, as you see, when you eat food, it goes down here. But when you eat minerals, some of them go up here. So all of the ethereal items, like I said, crystal essence, minerals, Ethereums, golds, those kind of things, all those go up here, while food and things is going down here. So maybe I just need to take a break for a minute and get some drink. But what I'm saying is that to move to where your ideas can actually power where you're going, all you do is do a little what's called terrain modification. You switch your normal intake to what kind of energy you're taking in, and you stop omitting elements such as Shilajit is a very powerful element. It's 85 minerals pulled from the base of the Himalayan mountains. You get that kind of stuff in the system versus, who knows what people are putting in their system today. And then the mind, body, and soul actually have the fuel that is necessary to do the things that I'm talking about. Because some of the stuff that I may be saying, people say, well, you're saying that, yeah, ideas can power you, but I need to get some type of substance. I need to get some type of money. So I'm just explaining the whole thing about how if you get control of your energy system from one point and you just start working on it from there and continuously building on it, with this level of knowledge that I'm presenting, then you eventually become in complete control of the vehicle. You put yourself back on the throne. But where we are in our state of consciousness, I love to include myself in this group only because I don't want people to think that I'm separate than them. Well, where we generally are is where now this being that has been seated in the throne, as we talked about, the being originally comes in, sits in here, pineal gland, mouth, nose, all the ports are here. Now has taken a trip down the spine. There was a war. They were kicked out of their own consciousness, basically, their own being able to know what's correct to do. And then are wandering around the lower worlds. Now, the direction of this, then, and we'll go back over all this if we have to, the direction of this, then, is instead of, as you see on the Caudacia staff, the energy moving straight up and into the brain, or going down and up, the energy of the person's consciousness is actually wavering through their actual vehicle. And maybe I may be butchering this a little bit, but I think we need to take a break real quick here and let me get a little bit of water. And
yeah,
I
sure.
really want to just explain how the Caudacia staff in itself really gives us the actual knowledge that's needed to understand the whole serpent myth, for us to understand how we've left the actual the crown area of our brain and went into the body and have gone down different trails and paths, and where we need to kind of go straight back up and that kind of thing. So that will kind of give us something of more of a guideline.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, there's so many different elements that you're bringing in there, and I just think maybe we could backtrack a little bit and just explain to people, because there's people that will watch this that have very advanced levels or they're a bit more advanced in their knowledge and their awareness, and then other people that are new. Maybe we can just define exactly what originally might have taken place, and maybe Sevan, I can get your take on where this, if we look at this like a computer system, or we look at this as we're talking about the body being a vehicle and everything else, and how there are different essences that can control the body, and we basically there's certain things we can do to have a higher consciousness controlling it. But right now, a lot of people are using more of a mechanical, lower type of energy to control it. What was the original hack that took place? I mean, we can maybe start with some of that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about first this de-evolution. Okay, we'll use that term because most people are familiar with that. What we're going to have to use is a word that I tend to not like to use, which is God, because God is very specific. And I won't get into that now. Of course, each word has a meaning. If you go into other countries, they don't call their supreme being God. They actually have another name for it. So our name for God does mean something specific. It's a Germanic God, Gud. So instead of getting into that whole Druidic story, we'll just go from the people's general concept of what they believe God is, which is a Godhead or the supreme being. Okay? So you have gods or goddesses. Okay? Actually, excuse me. You see why the reason why there's no goddesses in the entire God concept of supreme beings is that there's no separation. So do you see immediately when someone jumps up and says, well, the goddess, they're already in division? Because all gods, again, to denote a supreme being, are not separate. That's why the whole myth was gods always had a wife in the ancient text. They're basically saying that any supreme being had both poles inside of the same entity, right? So, okay, now you have, next, what's called just the sons of God. Okay, those are the ones that you hear about, but which are also connected to the Nephilim or the giants, etc. But the sons of God, also there were daughters of God. Obviously, the Bible there's not one part of the Bible that's written by a woman for a reason, and that is because there is definitely a phallic or a masculine thing going on in the Bible that serves to pretty much take us all off of balance in many ways. Other people knocking each other off balance even by assessing their religion and taking in their religion. But again, so you had sons and daughters of God then, which were more like angels or Nephilim or Amazons is the feminine state. And then you had men and women, okay? So that's the first thing that people need to see, is that the physical body is already 3 levels down. The physical body polarized into a sex is already 3 levels down of what we originally started as, okay? The second thing is that the riddle about this is encased within the book of Genesis, but it talks about this tree of the knowledge of good and evil that's inside of the garden, okay? Now, this knowledge of good and evil, because all this stuff should not be too far off of proving from something that you're seeing happen even within our children from the time that they are born to when they become adults. This knowledge of good and evil has everything to do with what we call puberty. It's actually when the child switches from this innocent state of not knowing really even good from evil. Like a child's just laughing, everyone's at the funeral crying. The child doesn't know what's going on. It's because they haven't reached this stage of good and evil that once you reach it, ye shall surely die. Because it's all about division after that. One's good, one's bad. Okay, so now I'm explaining to you the step-by-step of how things got offline. So this knowledge of good and evil was connected back to original act of reproduction. This means actually having a seed, or in this case, a baby, in an environment in which you don't know how to get out yourself. Now, we need to ask ourselves this question. So many people are fathers and mothers. I have a child. If we don't know about what's going on here, and we don't know how to get out of the body, which is something you can do while you're in a physical body. There's many people that have tested to it, and many people who are now professionals at it. Why would we really want to bring another seed into this world and get them trapped too? And not to mention, who are they? Wouldn't they then be another part of us on another string of a biorhythm? So if we happen to basically keep getting ourselves stuck here because nobody in our whole species knows how to get out of here, then we don't have a glass elevator going out of here all the time with people leaving and coming into Earth based on how many people are here and how, the weight of Earth and how much you can really take. We have 6-7 billion people with no place to go and feeling like they're going to run out of everything. Okay? So we need to realize that this first act of sex, also synonymous with the number 6. 6 is sex. It's the same word. You just remove the vowel. SX. We're not talking about Nissans. But this whole act of actually creating without knowing what we're actually doing is something that started our grief. That's why they say to the woman that the more you bring forth, the more it will bring more, it'll reap thorns and thistles for you. It'll be more trouble for you. And this is because until someone figures out exactly how to expand our state of consciousness, then every single person that's coming in here is subject to all of what is going on in this reality that we can't stand. We're now all agreeing that the way school is running, the way the food's coming out, Monsanto's and all this is killing us. And then we're bringing other babies in, they're shooting them up, they're doing things to them and killing them. Nobody has a way out. This is crazy. So what happened was, again, is that, now going back to the original act then, it's about responsibilities then, because the first child that, if you see in the Bible, was brought forth was Cain. Okay? Now, Cain is a code word. Cain is a code word for king. Cain is a king who's also a Cohen. He's a priest king. And his abbreviations are generally C and N. Now, this is how the ancient knowledge and the actual language start to tell you the story. Because the original story is that basically the first child, the sun god, the Messiah or whatever, that stepped on this earth there was a responsibility to actually take care of that child. And because of the entities, which is again the oversouls, that brought forth this child, not exactly nurturing this child in a way that it should have been nurtured, because it's now in the external reality, it has birthed what would come out of being in a surrogate reality. Meaning that if you don't understand your spiritual connection, then you don't have any foundation, really. You don't have, quote unquote, a soul. Now, and what I mean by that is that, again, you have to be connected to something in order to actually, you have to be rooted to it. That's why they use in the traditions of the ones who are causing a great deal of trouble, they use as their symbol a scythe, with the Grim Reaper, the thing in his hand, and they show you they cut the umbilical cord. This is a symbol of the detachment from the mother. Okay? So if you can get where I'm coming from, the external reality in this tense was being designed to separate a being that was never felt separate. Do you think the baby inside the womb feels separate? No. So this is also a great part of our journey, because I still don't believe that this entire world is in some kind of error. I just think they decided to teach us another level of what can be done. And we've been holding on for dear life, trying to figure out how to get this thing back under control while we're continuously spawning. Animals are spawning, humans are spawning, and this thing is still spinning. So it's almost like something that you got to figure out why, you got to fix the car, why it's running. Like all of the comparisons in the reality are all there. Like generally, if you go on any level of ascension, you have to do that while you're still working your job, while you're still trying to figure out how you're going to pay your rent. You're trying to fix your car, your vehicle, your vessel while it's still running and trying to stay in touch with the world. So what we're really dealing with, again, in the garden is we're dealing with this act of, you notice how they say that the angel said that he wanted to be like God and he wanted to create like God. Okay, now none of these characters are external. If there was the first being running around then it had to be none other than a family member, not some alien from another planetary system, etc. So another family member said, hey, let's create an external world that's just like heaven. As I always say, if it's done on heaven, please be done on earth. That's just like heaven, but it's going to be on earth. So this is nothing more than a shadow world. People are only seeing a part or a fraction of who they really are. And they're born on this day, this zodiac, and this, again, the star appears in the sky, and this is the essence that they've been given, and then they live out this life as being tunneled into this one character or program until they come back in again and start living into another life, unless they figure out how to get it under control. So if we want to start talking about how this is really working, we shouldn't really see it as some huge error and things that got off track, but just cause and effect. Because then you stay out of this whole zone of good and evil and calling back the hands of time and what shouldn't happen and what should happen. Now, let me show you what that is representing in the sign of the Caduceus staff. Now, on the Caduceus staff, you have the center pole. Caduceus staff, by the way, is actually another symbol, just like the pentagram of the human being. The cross is another symbol of the human being. The most powerful symbols are always symbols of the human being. You just have to be able to interpret them. So now, with the Caduceus staff, you see the pole that's going straight up, that's the spine, okay? Then you see the globe on top, that's obviously the head. Then you see these two serpents, which are actually the feet before they start ascending. And then they come up and they sit on the two sides of the globe. Notice how the Caduceus staff is. Just as you would have these two angels on your shoulders of good and evil telling you, hey, you should do that. No, you should do that. No, you should do that. And this, again, this ancient knowledge was already known. This is called basically the lower worlds or the urges of the serpent, which is the most silent of all creatures. It's silent because it speaks in your mind. It doesn't speak audibly so everyone can hear it. It's the ideas that are either good or evil. You should do this. You should do that. Meanwhile, they say straight and narrow is the path, meaning that the actual direction from the easiest way to point A to point B is a straight line, right? They tell you that in school. So why is it that these serpents are moving in this curve? This was known in the ancient tongue as zigzag zig. This means that they're, instead of going straight and narrow to the prize, they're moving through the worlds, just like you see the Sapphire. They're moving through these different worlds. So one day they're over here, the next day they're over there, and next day. But it's going to take a long time for them to actually get into where the real harmonics is. So this teaches you as a metaphor, the good and evil are just different variations of worlds that are basically offshoots of the path. While we're considering good and evil, why don't we just go into action? So, because that's the real thing. Like, if we sit back all day complaining about all these different individuals, we're going to burn up our time. And that's why they also say the serpent is synonymous with time. It loves wasting time. So, all the symbols, again, that are used in our theology are real symbols. Also describing, now, again, we take these same symbols, and like I said, you can write volumes on them. Now, these same energies that are moving through the body are Kundalini. Now, the black snake is in control of the physical world. Anyone that you know that knows about the occult and is really involved in the dark side of the occult, basically, they know that the dark current known as Irazuli runs through the Venusian voodoo system, also called Yoruba, which is why they named it Europe, and why you see Europe on the stride of a bull. So you're dealing with basically stuff that you can't even really comprehend unless you have a dark mind. So just stay away. You know, it's their best bet. Likewise, stay away from ultra-programmed seraphim. This is other individuals, and there's a few running around in the spiritual world. They work for what's called a realm of high-rank ascended seraphim masters. And they want to basically ethnically cleanse everything. That's their whole idea. It's just like how religion is formed, that until the world is destroyed, then there will never be anything right here. So this is when you get into this ultra state of consciousness that you're right. You take it upon yourself to actually, they say, kill them all and let God sort them out. You take it upon yourself to actually start denoting who's going to go to heaven, who's going to go to hell, who's going to learn, who's not going to learn. This is a person that is, yes, in a higher state of consciousness, but in the shadow world of their higher state of consciousness. So do you see why some people can, in playing this higher, lower thing, like, oh, he's advanced, he's highly spiritual, don't see that some people that are advanced and highly spiritual can be in the Shaddai side of their mind, meaning the shade side of their mind. And again, the shade world is like the serpent's world in every tense because it's hidden. The fourth dimension is controlled by the white snake. The third dimension is controlled by the black snake. These are both snakes. Straight and narrow is the path, meaning stay away from this whole talking in the ears and all these things trying to murmur to you and tell you what to do and what's going on. Be in action. You see what I mean? Action always seems to transcend talk. And in addition to that, you can generally control your body if you put it to doing something versus just, just sitting there and letting it be idle. So this is a real thing in every sense. Now, who are these beings? Because I don't want them to run off too far and everyone to think that, okay, then David Icke is right. There's some external hybrid reptilian beings running around duping us. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is that we all have all flora and fauna inside of our body. And if we choose to let our primordial state, which you see the alligator is the first strand of DNA, that was one of the building blocks of things. For us to get upset at the alligator would be like us just removing the flora end out of the entire reality. You see what I mean? So these animalistic traits are the elementals or the foundation that these worlds are built off of. But if we choose to act like animals, see, this is the thing. If you eat like an animal, which will eat on its own self, cannonball or cannonball. Cannonball means the god of Canaan. Canaan is a canine. It's the CNN connection to the Conan, Sumerian, those that eat flesh, the domesticators of the animals. You see what I mean? So all of it really connects there if you understand the occult. But for the people that don't understand the occult, now we have to take it into an entirely different pretext. Like, they don't have the time to play around in the caves like they're Laura Croft. Like, there's a lot of information out there that's deeply mystical, but what people really need right now is rejuvenation. They don't necessarily need to hear the whole embroidered story of the Persian fire gods and how man figured out a long time ago that the primordial being that some call father or God is fire. Like, look in the Yod symbol tells you that. That sums up the entire Kabbalah in Hebrew, one symbol. The Yod is the flame. Everything comes from fire. Why? Because everything dissolves in fire. When you use fire, it ignites. and it comes from nowhere, meaning that when you strike two objects together, you immediately make fire appear. But you notice how fire only appears when there's some level of conflict. Either it's two chemicals that are opposed to each other, or two items that are struck together with force. So you see how the primordial sense has, if we start to try to adapt it in this further stage in our consciousness, will only bring pain to ourselves. Because when you were around, when there was no such thing as pain, when people were, or not people, but beings were standing in the sun, because there was no concept of something being hot, all that wasn't invented yet. So we've been developing these worlds. Like, this is aeons of work put together in this environment, and surely it's not going to be disintegrating anytime soon. It's not designed like that. Your whole dream is designed to, when you die, you wake up in another world. So there will not be any end as far as how they denote it here. So the best thing is to get in control, to learn how to surf the cosmic wave, to see now that the great arcanum is right here and ready for you to actually assess it for yourself and to apply it. You are the candidate. You are the initiate. Not all of this external lines and degrees. And the degrees are based on fire. You see how fire is measured in degrees? Degrees of fire are degrees of the spirit. Not anything to do with, because of course the spirit is fire, soul is the sun, Latin word for soul. Not anything to do with some external books and some medals and badges and some over trumped up terms, and then telling you that you've succeeded and done something. And that's, of course, the play is to tell a person things like, oh, you can wash all your sins away by simply admitting and saying one thing. No, if you know you've done something wrong, you must even toil more in the vineyard to make sure that you end up working out right, whatever it is that you cause. So the scapegoat, then, if you use that term, is Jesus. And that goat is the goat of Mendes. So that's why, again, we're getting into occult stuff here, but that's why for those who pursued spiritual knowledge, and then they start going into some of these the real magical books, even some of them that cost $40,000, these magical books, you see Jesus in there. You see the name being used, because the whole rite and ritual is from a land that all the prisoners went to, which is Egypt. Egypt was a land of prison. A prism, which is a triangle, right? A prism is a prison. So the first knowledge of how to trap light. So if you were wandering around the world, you had people that were studying flesh. You had people that were studying trees. But the highest level of teaching, i.e. Atlantean, that A is a pyramid, was done in Egypt. And that knowledge was about the weights and the measures of souls, how to put light and trap light into an actual vessel. So, and you see that knowledge being used today. And so how this incarnation process works, and this is important, some other stuff to ingest very deeply, is now that you're on Earth, now the primary goal of the DNA that's wired is to survive, right? It's been trained and now survive. So it now must reproduce. This comes as a heat and a burning passion to a young man, right? It's a heat associated with it. But now you got two roads here, because either Kundalini is going to go down or Kundalini is going to go up. And that's going to determine everything about how you experience life after that. So with the male Kundalini force, when the male Kundalini force, excuse me, let me rewind here, because I was actually, let me just think, because, this stuff, like when I talk about this stuff, by the way, I visualize it. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I see things that you have to know before you know this. And then it's like, no, you got to know that. So, just bear with me for just a second here so I can catch my train of thought. But just to talk about, again, just to leave that for a minute and go to something. And you'll probably just have plenty of stuff to just chop up and put into different places. And I'm sure it'll come out as a complete message. But to see this completely as this energy system, which is known as Kundalini, you have to see that to answer the question then, because some people have this other question about, if Kundalini then, because I tell people that Kundalini is definitely tied into how much current and currency that they have in this world, right? So then they say, well, then if that's the truth, then why does somebody like Madonna or somebody like Rick Ross have a lot of money? Surely they don't have Kundalini. Actually, they do. And it's activated but is going in the wrong direction. It's actually symbols of this when you study the ancient book, and it looks like an inverted pentagram because the energy, the focal point of the energy is going down. Now, this is called, again, the inversion. This is the hanged man. That's why they make it the first part of their initiation, because the first thing they want to do is send the man's kundalini down and then out of his soul, which is in the bottom of his feet. That's why they call it the sole of the foot. Now, this governs, of course, your spiritual experience, because once you release kundalini from the Cossacks, now remember, kundalini generally is not, it's moving on a lower level, so that's enough to keep you alive and to keep you running in a physical reality. But as far as the immense energy and the power that's attached to it, it's dormant in the Cossacks of your spine, in the place where you used to have a tail, more than 33 parts of your back. You know, obviously, tail is the extension of your spine. So before that domestication into the physical body, you still see, of course, children popping up like that, especially in the East and in India with tails. But before that, that was where, of course, then the consciousness retreated to furthest. It's furthest down the spine into the lowest area when it's afraid, when it learns fear. That's why anything that you scare, they draw back. If you go, rah, something, they'll jump back. It'll draw up. So the pineal gland closes with fear. And it then ejects the sentient being from inside. That being ends up in the lower part of the world, is tucked into the cossacks of the spine, scared until you, or now I won't even say scared, but just sleep, okay? And then when you wake it up, now, once it's awoke, it has to choose whether it's going to go up. This means up through these chakras or down into the chakras of the lower world, netherworld. See, they never point out that the 7 chakras that begin from the base are the ones here. But even if you go to Sai Baba's site, where they have the real charts of the chakra systems, and especially show that they're not in a straight line, you know, we have to talk about why that is later. But the lower world, the lower chakra is known as the netherworld, which correspond to the serpents, the dogs, the other animals, even the ones closest to being human, but still subhuman. That is where that energy then goes. So now, when a person that is then what's called illuminated gets this illumination, it's actually, that's why there's the symbolism of the goat tied into it. It's an inversion of their energy, and then it moves into the lower world. And of course, the lodge is configured to make that happen. It's the difference, as Dan Winter would say, between centripetal and centrifugal. There are places which the indigenous already mapped that are actually the exit and entry points, just like we see on our body, but they're in the world. And obviously in certain cities, especially where there's a lot of churches and lodges, they build them right on these entries and exit points. And they can even change them based on the needles, or like Cleopatra's needle, the needles that they put into them, like acupuncture. Because remember, if the Chinese then discovered that the whole thing was the body was the earth, and the earth was the universe, all that was synonymous. The moment they got these books, then they were already starting to do the same acupuncture that the Chinese do to cause certain levels of energy to go in different directions, divert energies, make certain places sick, all of that kind of stuff. That's what they were then using as their methods of intrepidness. We'll just use that term. So what you're dealing with then is that once the candidates in their initiation system, once the candidate's energy is inverted, his first experience with spirituality is indeed hell. So the first thing that they generally ask for is not to see it again. So this would be like if you just went on something like DMT. There's nothing miraculous going on here unless you've not had any spiritual experience, which most of these people haven't. But once you get into the inverted state of consciousness, and then all your fears are there, you're seeing phantoms and all this stuff, the first thing that you're going to ask for is to make it go away, and you're going to think that the people who cause that have some type of control over the lower world. Now remember, most initiates, that especially the new ones, they don't see, none of this happens. They just get paperwork, they treat it as a fraternity, and they do what they do, and they keep making money. I'm talking about some of the people that entered into the higher positions but are there in complete fear, but still carrying out everything they need to carry out as if they know something that nobody else does. And it's because they've had contact with something that they still haven't been able to identify, but is the lower side or primordial side of ourselves, i.e. the serpent. You see how that works? So now, again, so from that person's standpoint, every single thing they see after that is going to have this taint of the lower world on it. because they're now seeing through their lower chakras. And this is why, remember, Kundalini activation equals that you can see through your chakras, which are like eyes. If you activate the higher worlds, you see in the higher states of consciousness, the future, all that kind of stuff. If you go into the lower world, you only see the end. You only see death, decay, chaos. You only see that kind of stuff, fire, right? So what happens is that, so their energy has moved down into an area where it's changed how they see things. So now their filters, even if you're talking about something that would generally be innocent, the filter taints it as it goes through. So that's where you now understand what is happening with some of these initiated dark occult people and why they keep keeping up this evilness is that they can't see that the world really needs help and that they're a part of everything. So just so you understand it, they're no longer seeing above the waist, or at least at the waistline, which is known as Midgard. Okay? Now, the one who is on the path of ascension, of course, the energy is going to move up. And it's going to encounter the root chakra first. And of course, I'm pretty sure you've done a lot of studies, maybe yourself, on the root chakra and the type of things that you encounter when moving into that chakra. So I won't exactly and of course, I've done a lot of recordings just on that, so I won't get long-winded in it. But the understand is now the person is on the quest. Sometimes we call this the astral quest. But it basically is that they're now on the quest of this activation. Now, let me explain something very, very important then. Now that the energy has moved out of the coccyx, it doesn't mean when the energy goes up that it immediately is going to go to the first chakra. Like this is just 1, 2, 3, and this is easy as ABC. It's not like that. The energy may go up into the heart chakra first. They activate there, especially based on this experience that is causing this activation. Or it may move right into the crown chakra. Sometimes the people who activate from the root chakra right to the crown chakra right away don't come back. Those generally end up in the crazy house because what they see is just, and some of the people that enter in the lower systems too end up in the crazy house. But the whole aggressive movement, and this is why after the Dark Ages, the real masters of this knowledge started basically hiding this knowledge and making it a secret and not giving it to anyone, is because after the Dark Ages, the only thing that a person could really do with this knowledge is just like what you see people doing today. They don't really go and find magical books that are going to be about healing the world. They're going to try to find a magical book that's about doing something to make some girl fall in love with them. You see what I mean? So their whole pursuit at how the magical world is inverted already. So what happened is that the ones that were holding these bodies of knowledge of what I'm explaining to you today shut it down for a moment, especially after the Dark Ages when everyone became ignorant by the Jesuits. They shut down giving out this knowledge and information because it was doing more harm than good. Now you had activated negative entities running around the planet with stuff that they could do with their mind or lower body, and then abusing their entire structure. So again, to really see this then is you see then yourself at every single point of this. That's why the human is a hyperdimensional being. You're not just this physical entity standing here. You're not just this person running around the dream world, which is quite extensive these days especially. And you're not just this other entity inside the coccyx or in one of these chakras hanging out. You're all of them. And then even more that you actually don't have the energy to put the power into so you can see yourself there. And I'll explain this. In the corpus callosum of the brain, this is known as the bridge. Okay? Now on the bridge is broke down now. There's no communication between the left side and the right side of the brain. They got into so many arguments that this corpus callosum, which has millions of neurons, burned out. And now there's no communication between the left and the right side of the brain until you reestablish that whole node and that whole area. But once that's reestablished, then what you have is you have a system. This is where this whole Messiah path comes from. You have a system where you can actually go from wherever chakra you're at all the way into the high chakra and cycle back around and then into the lower world. Now you ask yourself the question, why, if I've been into the higher chakras, would I ever want to go back to the lower world? Did you forget everyone that was still in the lower world? Like this is the whole, that's why ascension doesn't really happen for many, because ascension is a selfish idea. Ascension is about leaving everyone in the hands of Rex Mundi, the Minotaur in the middle of the maze.
Yeah.
Not about emancipating everyone and not leaving until that happens. See, that's what got me into knowing and being able to feel the energy that's associated with this information that I'm presenting. Maybe not even so well. I always say I write better than I actually speak. But for people to truly know, I came into this because the first book that I wrote, The Code of the Matrix, I gave it away for free. The next thing I did is I opened up a network that was also free, and I gave all the information, all the books, and everything that I could about Ascension to everyone, even if it was not completely legal. I would easily, because what I had dealing with and me understanding that how this really needed to happen, I was willing to risk even my actual safety just to make sure people got the knowledge and the information. So, but from that, everything moved out of the way. Like all of the hindrances that people would normally meet on the path, they couldn't touch the vibration that I had entered. It was almost as if something greater, which I just call the oversoul, us at a higher state, took interest. Like, wow, okay, here's one that actually is getting some of the concepts that really need to come through in order for this whole thing to really work. Now we have to start pushing out this energy and information and giving it to individuals, and then not putting too much in between them actually getting it. So not to get long-winded about that, but I think that what we need to talk about here then, especially in getting this whole conversation to coalesce into something, is we then need to now take this step by step about how a person can get themselves out of this whole situation and then back in. Because that leaves off on this last part of the conversation I was talking about, is why would you want to go back into this lower netherworld? And it's because once you reach into these higher states of consciousness, you gather things, you gain things. And then those things is like a pack on your back. Surely you don't need it. Like I told you, the brain doesn't eat food. It doesn't, it doesn't need fleshly meat and things like that, right? So surely in the higher state of consciousness, you don't need all of the things that the people are starving for in the lower worlds, right? And so it's like a gift when you gain it, which is really this knowledge, information, expansion, application. It is accompanied with a vivid energy that can emit from the hands when you want to do something to making people well again, or from the mouth, or from all faculties of being able to push into something. You can push a great deal of power into it. But what I'm saying here is that now you need to go and get that to the lower world, because the only thing in the lower world, what you really start finding out, is other parts of you. In the ultimate maxim of all is self. Meaning that the highest level of consciousness here is to understand that everything is you. And it's a real thing. But it's also not about you isolating one thing and terrorizing yourself about that one thing so much that it becomes the focal point of how you're handling all your energy. So whether that's a serpent, whether that's a president, whether that's a Occupy Wall Street movement, whatever it may be, if you focus too much on it, let it spray out, like we always talk about, be full spectrum, then you're becoming and you're fueling exactly what it is that you wish to somehow end. You're doing the same thing to it as you're crying that it's doing to you. So what I'm saying to people is that instead of seeing all of what we're experiencing as this negative thing that needs to be removed, just like a doctor would see cancer as something that needed to be cut out, radiated, and removed, which is basically going to kill the person after that, we need to practice entirely different techniques about how to neutralize and harmonize the situations that we found ourselves in. So this goes back again to terrain modification. When you have been living a life that you've become somewhat of a you become a symbiote for a vampire. This is the term, meaning that when you eat artificial food, you think negative thoughts, and you do those kind of things, then there's something that has to digest all that for you. There's something that has to eat all of that. That is what we're calling the devil and the negative energies and the Illuminatis and all of this. They are fueling themselves off of our waste, literally in every single tense. So in that kind of relationship, when you look at it into nature and things, you can find the solution of what exactly to do. You see, so people were asking, okay, so what do I do about it? What you do is you have to practice the levels of healing and wholeness, which is by giving it the opportunity to expand because you're expanding. So this is how you tell your body in every tense. And like I said, it goes to everybody. You tell your body, look, and you do this by action. Now I'm switching frequencies and vibrations. I'm going into something more expansive than this. You're welcome to come. This is when you start drinking blue-green algae and you start drinking all these things, all the worms in the system which are controlling their frequency, candida and all these other frequencies of worms that are replicating inside the body, they have two choices. They can either transmute, and they even have a transmuting stage. Don't deny them. Or they can pass, which means they'll actually come out of your body and come out of your come out of the bowels. Bowel means Lord. Come out of the bowel, and they'll be gone. But you have to do it like that, because if you go and kill them, and they've been around ever since your beginning, maybe since you were drinking Similac with iron or Enfamil or all of that, and you've never really cleaned out your intestinal system or none of that, if you try to kill them immediately, you'll probably do a lot of damage to yourself. And this is what most people are presented with now, is that they have to start working on something that's not immediate. This is a 6-month thing. There's no rush. Once you get into this, you'll discover there's no time. They're playing a game out here in this illusionary porous reality. Like everything here is porous, air and can pass through it. So to me, and to how it should be for everyone else, all this is just made up of globules of essence that can easily be maneuvered by the right state of mind. But we're still in a point where we have to do this smoothly. Be easy. Don't do something aggressively that you're going to regret or that's not going to work. You start gradually changing the frequency. This should take no more than 6 months. It starts off with changing the diet, changing all intake, the air you breathe. Basically, you order it on your necessity. The body is calibrated so we know what will be the most effective to us based on how long we can live without it. So that means the first most important thing is our breath. How long can we live without our breath? It's a very short period of time. It's shorter than how long we can live without water. Likewise, water is shorter than how long we can live without food. So this is the order that you have to go in. You work with your breath. Like, what am I breathing every day? The next thing, your water. Can you get some distilled water in the house? You know, should I invest in one of those $200 rather than $200 pair of shoes and then have an infinite water supply that's actually powered? Distilled water goes in batteries for a reason. Think about distilled water. Now, if you find on Pulse, they'll say that it's bad for you, it's unstructured water. Don't listen to what they're saying, because in theory, it just in itself, if a battery, one in your car, needs distilled water before it can actually charge its cells again, you can't pour tap water in there? How, if your body is a cell for energy, could tap water ever power you and help you? The second thing is that if you notice why they tell you to put distilled water in an iron or in a diffuser or in anything that actually has some level of combustion or steam to it, is because tap water clogs up and puts calcium all around the ducts of these devices. So where water sprays out, it's all calcified. Where steam comes out, it's all calcified. So why would you put this same kind of water in your system for it to calcify all of your ducts? So this is the same thing. Likewise, how often do you change the filters in your car? You can't drive your car for 10 years without changing the oil filter. So how are we driving our body for 10, 20 years without changing the filters and then acting like we're seeing things clearly? How can you see things clearly? Your filters are dirty. Now, where do these filters come from? That's the other thing, deeper knowledge. The filters are, you notice how when the baby is coming out of the womb, it's passing its mother's organs? It's in there with its mother's organs. Those organs are planets. All these planets are playing tones and vibrations in the orchestra that we call this organism, which is the universe. So if for some reason in that whole process, these organs are coming out of tune or these organs are being damaged, this is definitely going to affect not only the vehicle, but also anything coming from the vehicle. So we have to tune it up. We have to see that the filters, which are actually, again, the animal bodies, that's why each animal has a different shape of eye. Look at this. When you come in as this globule, based on what kind of essence that you're going to reincarnate into next, which is governed by your attractions and things. As you're passing through these portals, which are actually the eyes of all the different animals, like you see the goat has a different eye, the cat has a different kind of eye. So all these are different portals that are actually shaping. That's why the Vesica became so important, because it was one of the final portals that shapes the soul. So that way when it gets into the body, it's actually been shaved down in many tenses. Meaning that when you start from this grand, all-powerful being out in the universe with no limits, you actually are basically this massive form that is able to project your magnetic field beyond the size of something like a small body. So when you come into any kind of frequency like this one, in order for you to even be here without blowing this entire thing out of the frame, you have to be actually shaved down. And this is meaning that your senses, many of your higher senses, have to be removed. This is hidden within the riddle of Tammuz and Inanna. Tammuz dies, this is a Sumerian myth, Tammuz dies, the sun god, and his mother must go down into the lower regions or hell to get him out. And every region that she goes to, she loses a piece of her garment, her earrings, her dress. Okay, these are all metaphors. What it's talking about is that when you enter a physical body, you lose these 12 cents, 11 cents, 10 cents. Because if you came here into this world, like you see on John Carter, the movie, if you come into this world and you're doing things that are not fitting the geometry, the structure, and the essence of how this world is developed, you'll blow this world. You flying around your neighborhood right now is enough to end the game for everything. So people need to see that our actions, who we are, what we can do, is all associated with energy. Every move that we make sends out a certain level of energy. And when you do something great from a higher sense and a higher state of consciousness, the ripple effect of that energy can impact a reality like this heavily, for better or for worse. So do you see why there's so much policing? Police meaning a polarization, keeping you on one side or another. Either you're this ultra good guy or you're this ultra bad guy or woman or man. You see what I mean? So what we have to do now is we have to negate this game that we're playing between this is right, this is wrong, this is what I want to do, this is not what I want to do, and get right to the control point of what we should be doing, which is every single moment, like a dolphin is conscious of every single breath that it's taking. You need to now see that I need to be conscious of my breathing. I need to breathe all the way in. I'm breathing shallow, like as you see, most people breathe shallow. The next thing, I need to be conscious of what I'm drinking. I'm drinking basically a toxic brew. There's a chemical inside tap water that makes it clear, like Clearly Canadian. If you remove that chemical, which you can do with a foot ionizer, all that stuff that you see in the foot ionizer machine is actually the water. It's not coming from the feet, because the ionization basically neutralizes that chemical. So you see the water is already brown that we're drinking. How could it not be? Think about it. We actually take water and we recycle it in some of these machines, chlorine and all this, and then we go ahead and drink it again. But chlorine just basically makes it all white. It doesn't remove any of the dissolved sediments and things. So the water we're really drinking looks like coffee. Then it looks like something clear and crystal. So then the food. I mean, the food, you are what you eat. If you eat things that are artificial, you become an artificial being. There is a surrogate womb here, meaning that this is not really a game in every sense of the word, but it is a game, meaning that they've actually erected a shadow world that is so similar to how the real world works, people can't tell the difference between the two. This is when, again, the difference between actuality and the difference between reality and actuality. What you think is really going on versus what's actually going on. So we have in our reality now something before us that is like a quest. That means this turns now into an adventure. Now, I was an optimist since I was a kid. So now when I understood this kind of knowledge, and I said, man, this is the most exciting thing. This stuff is real. All the stuff that I'm explaining to people about, the different animals, the energies, the essences, the planets, the vehicles, the high levels of knowledge, the Atlanteans, the Lemurians, our state of consciousness before the fall, the purpose of the fall. the next level of our evolutionary honor, which is our children, the expansion levels of when you experience something so low, it sets you up only for the highest high. Obviously, we're in our low point. And also looking at our reality and saying that, okay, I know now the truth, so I know that there's something greater. Instead of looking at it that there's only more doomsday and doom and gloom ahead. Like if we haven't known all of what I'm explaining on the phone today, some of, again, is legible, maybe the rest is not, but what you've understood, if that is true, then that means that we are indeed living that 10% of life, or they say 10% of the brain. We're indeed living in this only the small spectrum, which is like an inkling or a shadow to what we really are. We can prove it by other things such as the atom, which they say that we're full of atoms. You split one atom, it can explode this whole entire thing out of the frame. One atom. So just the whole idea that human beings don't have power, it's not based on anything. It's not based on anything but falsehood. Even if that person doesn't believe they have power, but they are made of atoms, you have power. You just can't access it. That's what that plays out in the external reality, is them not wanting anyone to have any nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons is the external version of implosion that is accomplished within the vessel. So when you're playing around with atoms, you actually discover how to tap into an immense level of energy. So just like when they were playing with codename Atom, meaning this the garden prototype of man, that's when they were able to discover all of what it is that I'm talking about now. So it's the other way around is what I'm trying to tell people. The knowledge wasn't something that we had to learn. It was something that we were. Now we're several steps off the flock, basically. We're several, God, sun God, man. We're several. It shows everywhere that we're several stages from what we really are. But once you can see what you used to be, or where you used to be, now you know what you can become. And that's how everything in this planet grows. It knows what it was before. So we have a great reference point for what we were before. Now we get an opportunity to become that again. And that's really all I'm really delivering to people. I can talk here 6 or 7 hours. I can stop and start again and even have a more fluid conversation than what was said before. But it's not going to matter an inkling if the person has no desire to expand themselves further than where they are. But I will tell people this. I was one of those individuals that when I was hearing something that was someone saying, it was very easy for me to tell that whether it had some substance to it or not, whether they were onto something. Most of the books that I've read, and I've read, I guess, close to 6,000, 7,000 spiritual books now. Most of them I take in through audiobooks. I have a thing that converts to audiobooks, so just take it in one night. And that body of knowledge has showed me that our world has starved for the true knowledge. Masonic books, which I have about 5,000 of them here, almost double the amount of other spiritual books, just to flood in, you keep flooding the doctrines of men who read and study with falsehood. The rest of the 80% of the thousands of books that are written by individual authors, 80% of them were still under some level of dogma or some level of misunderstanding about symbolism and things based on what they understood or understood about religion. Then you have the cream. 20 to 15% of these documents written, Velikovsky's World in Collision, Jacob Lorber, Crisis Kundalini, these kind of documents are the final ones left that can give you insight to the truth. So I've had the pleasure, I've come to Earth, I've got the t-shirt. I've had the pleasure of reading about the truth and then living it, which I'm in the body of truth. I told you they have a saying that says you should not reinvent the wheel. Everyone knows this term. You should not reinvent the wheel. The wheel is really the body, because that's why it's still connected to the pentagram, still connected to phi, still connected to a circle, etc. It's a wheel. That's why I was telling you before, all these structures and organizations are designed after the body because they know that they'll work, because they know the body works. So when I mean not reinventing the wheel, what I'm saying is that when you go inward and you start discovering who you really are and what you really can do, there's nothing else that's needed further than that. But you are going to need the information that is actually something that can be done. Like, I think that's where humanity is right now. Is they just need the information that, look, I'm here to tell you that the most powerful things that you can do for other people and inside have nothing to do with throwing electricity around the room and shocking Sith Lords. But everything to do with that person that's down the street that's still living in that same dank conversation and that same state of mind that you may be able to build a bridge to. Now what we're doing is we're just building bridges. Like, I'll go into all states of consciousness. Somebody may even find me on PlayStation Live and they're talking about how this fake reality that everyone's playing is still so similar to the reality that they're playing in real life. And still bringing that guy off the platform into something like astroquest.com. There's no place, basically what I'm saying, there's no place that I cannot go, because that's the same thing as when you went into the highest chakra already and got all the gifts, you obtained it then. But in all of this, can't you see how in immortality we got to find something to do? So all of the actions and things that we do and we carry out are just a part of something that's just going to keep running forever. And the faster that we get into it and start building and accelerating into it, probably the more energy and the energy and expansion that we're really going to have. Running away from something that is going to continue forever is not the solution. You're still going to have to come back to it. And so that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about first fixing the situation inside by monitoring your intake, closing your gates for a moment, meaning every path that things enter, your room, all these different places, pause it for a moment to see if you're taking in things that are toxic, things that are not giving you proper astral hygiene. Astral hygiene is when you have something in your vicinity or in your room that is emitting a negative vibration. Negative music does this a lot when it's on discs or magnets. If you saw this on the astral plane, you just would see huge columns of disruptive energy. So astral hygiene and protect yourself to a certain degree on this dimension until it gets to a stage of what I was talking about before, which is the day after ascension, which is when you don't have this whole overboding thing that's saying that you need to go and do this and you need to go and do that and all that. Things have now reached a state of fluidity and reached a state of what we'll call harmonics. Now, as far as perfection is concerned, we were already perfect. So once you start messing with perfection, remember I said don't reinvent the wheel? Once we started messing with perfection, to take this all the way back to the beginning of what people were trying to see, well, what really happened? When we try to mess with something that's already perfect, the only thing that we can do is mess it up. We wanted to look underneath the hood, just like anything. You want to see how it works if you're a smart person. And in looking under that hood and in trying to pull out different pieces of it, it was like a Pandora's box. The human being is really Pandora's box. When you start opening it up and start figuring out what's going on inside of it, this is synonymous with when they first cut open the first bodies and start mapping out the ventricles and seeing the connections with things in nature. When you do that kind of thing, you got to be prepared for what's exactly going to happen next. And that's the kind of world that we're living in. There were many people that feared what they saw in the body once they started opening it up, from either a mental level, a physical level, or a spiritual level. And then they worked heavily to close that door again. And in working heavily to close it, only created an area that wholly existed on fear. Because that's what we're dealing with now in this world. We're trying to stop so many things. It's putting us into this whole state of fear, which is the general, the tone of this entire dimension, which keeps it on a low frequency. So, hopefully that's something that could be understood by people. Again, I may need to answer some just direct questions, but I think that the knowledge in itself, as I always tell people, that whatever you don't understand, if you listen to it again and you really want to understand it, you'll start finding out how this fits in with certain things that you're already studying. I'm sure a lot of people have already come to their own revelations within the conversation about certain things that were said. And I think also that in most cases I speak specifically to different people about their questions. And that's why there's never like a complete, this is where we begin and this is where we end. We kind of go all over the place because someone hears something that exactly is what they need to hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, where to begin? I mean, there were so many great elements brought in there. But what I wanted to maybe just out of my own curiosity, when we're talking about when we're talking about when we're talking about back to the origin of where, we're talking about the fall of man, we're talking about this journey where we were originally perfect. You're referencing Atlantis and Lemuria and times before, and then we've gone into this twisted, backwards, synthetic state. We were talking about how there's sort of, the way I've always seen it is we've always had Earth in its maybe natural state, the Mother Earth, but then we clearly see a synthetic sort of web that's been woven into it, and we're being convinced that that's the real thing, when in fact we're completely missing the point, which is why we live in chaos and sorrow and all of that. And then we were referencing sort of, I'm just trying to understand a little bit what you mean by what was us that we did in the past that sort of twisted in the future, and what was maybe an external, or what are the right words for this? But like
an invasion or something else doing it.
Yeah.
But what happens is that it's easier to see it as a smear. That all of our actions are like a smear across time. They're not just at one point. So what happens is that even if it was an oversoul doing it, like, okay, think about this. If you go back, let's say 6 grandmas and 6 grandpas, you're in there, basically. You're still inside of there. It's again like a tree. It's like a fractal. It's yet to unfold, but you're actually still there. So what this tells us, and what we see exhibited in life in general, is that that's not a rule that just exists here. It exists in the universe. So when we keep going up it, if you want to say that term, we're getting more towards the apex point. All of these different forms and they and them and the goat and the reptile and all of them dissolve into forms that are still committing actions that are leading us into certain reactions. So the only thing the universe is doing is action, reaction, action, reaction. It's not really doing positive and negative. Positive and negative will always be determined by the reaction. You see what I mean? So it's more of something that is a given. It's going to happen anyway. It's not something that needs to be really determined or figured out. So we still have to admit in many tenses that what is going on with the ones that haven't seemed to learn yet is that they're still in these lower frequencies that have everything to do with that smear of the past. So instead of this graduated being who understands how to be symbiotic, not vampiric, and gives things to other people that really are just family members, the whole lot, that is the advanced state of mind of someone who's seen everything. You see what I mean? They pulled back off the fractal and seen that, oh, we're all the same. I better start treating everyone nice. And they do that naturally. You see, they may even come into a whole life where they've already understood that. So that's how their whole life consists of just continuously contributing to humanity. Versus the old state of mind in darkness, ignorance, selfishness, thinking that it's the only thing that exists, that is still present here. Meaning that this smear of time is not all, and this is what they say, the universe loves this because it keeps different things going on. Because if we had everyone on this planet exactly at the same stage of consciousness, there would be no movement. Now, if you want to go into the space where there's no movement, which is called outside of time, it was an option for you. That's why we have a mental vehicle, spiritual vehicle, and physical vehicle. So when we get tired, per se, of one state of consciousness or one way of interacting with this, we can move into another. The only thing that's required, though, is for you to have mastery over at least one of them, because they all match up to each other. But if you don't have mastery over any of them, then you're lost. And that's why most of the ancients that were on this planet worked in levels of mastery. So we still can't be surprised if even the experience that we're having now leads to yet another level of mastery. Something that doesn't have to be repeated again, but surely something that needs to take place once to give a reference point to what to avoid and what to attract. So as magnets, I can think of a thinking magnet, because we're all magnets then. A thinking magnet wants to know what to repel and what to attract. The only way it's going to learn that is in what we call reason, thinking, experience. Where is the module that reason, thinking, and experience even takes place? Earth. A giant, I don't even want to call it a simulation because this is very real, but it's a giant organism designed for us to experience mentally, physically, and spiritually really any variation, especially when we can get our heads above water, meaning that if we can get some kind of control or bearing, because remember, it's a wave. And in your life, you've already gained control and bearing. Many of the people that will be listening to this message have gained control and bearing because they can get on the internet. They can speak to the person next door. They have two hands. There's many things that they've actually been given, these gifts, basically, that already are equaling, basically, even if you're in a human body, it's already equaling that you reached a very high state of consciousness. The only thing, again, is to actually see that this is constant maintenance. There's no, like some people say to me, well, okay, what do I need to do in order to just to finish this? Or what do I, just tell me what I need to do. As this is just one statement that I need to tell a person, which I would have told them a long time ago. I definitely don't have time to waste people's time. But just one statement and one thing that I can tell a person to do or that they do that finishes it off for them, and then it's over after that. I'm sorry. There's nothing like that in the universe. There's no end. There's no one thing that you need to do. It's constant maintenance. In the scripture says they wrestle against the kingdom every day. Yes, and we always are basically protecting it, or they'll overrun it and take over it. What does this mean? This means that every single day come these thoughts that what they call thinking. It's going to lead you into the wrong direction. But yet, if you resist it, you win that war. But if they breach your gates, meaning that now you have the lower world, the lower body, the lower animal sense telling your brain to send out commands for you to go places. Now the lower world is in control. Remember, the brain has to send out the command to do something. Like it has to make the last decision. This is that whole choice component. So first of all, in a reality where there's no choices, none of this works. So Earth, it works a lot because there's a lot of choices. So the lower world sends up the inclination and says, hey, let's go to the club tonight. The higher world has the option to either accept that, which means it actually takes the vibration of the lower world, or decline that, which means that it stays in this higher state of consciousness if it deems that that's not going to benefit the consciousness. Now, the way we can also see this is another way. If you know that your body is again, okay, so let me just explain it this way. If you know that in the higher mind, okay, I totally lost the idea, but just give me a minute and I'll explain it another way. But there's another way to see how this, the best thing that you can do is to start to separate your parts of your body and understand their inclination, like the arms. And, you know, arms is synonymous with Mars. That's actually the same word, A-R-M-S. M-A-R-S. So the arms are Mars. They're used for war. Generally, this is what you fight with, right? And then you have this torso, which is really the Taurus, right? Which is really that part of the constellation, which is the bull. Then you have inside of the Taurus or the torso all of the other organs that were born in Taurus. As they say, the seven sisters is the seven sister constellation of the Pleiades is inside of Taurus. Seven sisters then being organs, and they're inside of the torso. Then you have the Alpha Draconis region, which is the lower part of the body and the actual tail of the universe. So you have all this going on, but what I was saying is the gift is that we already ascended. The soul is already inside of the vehicle. So all of this past tense stuff that we need to obtain and ascend to something, we actually already did that already. Now we're at a point where we got to remember that we did it. We know that we did it because we're actually already in the stage of already accomplishing it. So once again, when the lower inclination speaks into the higher world, you just have to be there to be that check and balance system. You have to actually come back into the seat of yourself. And so if you want to know what sleep is, it's when someone leaves the control point or the throne of the body and then goes into another part of the body and there's no one running things. If you see us on this dimension, all of our higher states of consciousness have been vacated as far as how we're carrying out on the dimension and what we're doing as a collective species. And where we are is running around in the lower worlds with mirrors attracting us, like, oh, I want to go and do this, and oh, she needs to look at me, and I can't stand her, and I need that kind of car. And all this stuff is definitely lower world stuff. So we're definitely not, most people are not seated inside of their brain because they've already been thrown out. And this is also the major part. All of us have to go through this. You make a sober estimate of yourself. You have to see, are you still in control? Are there urges, habits, or hobbits, and things like that that are already allowing you not to really do what you want to do? Like people that have eating disorders, they need to eat. And every time they don't want to eat that, they know that they're dying. They know that they're getting overweight, but they still eat. So what's going on? There's a war that they've lost. Now, when this idea sends this thing to the brain, there's no resistance. The resistance is too weak. How that occurs is that the actual worm, if you want to understand it, the bacteria or the Bacchus, these are also living energies hardwired with the mode of survival. When they have replicated in the system, they're not doing anything wrong. They think that this is home. You've given them a home because of what you're eating. So when they send the frequency and say, hey, we need more because we need to survive, and then that makes you go and get the things and eat the things that allow them to survive. You see what I mean? Now it's still, they're only going to replicate more, which is still going to lower the frequency further. So you see, the body then is like this thing that needs to be maintained all the time. If you start eating the wrong things, if you start not cleaning yourself, if you start even getting the wrong levels of information or tainted information, it's going to start to clog up things. And so if nobody is knowing that this is going on, which is the state of where we're at now in humanity, if nobody knows that this is actually going on, what condition can they really be in? And then you have the explanation of why the world is the way it is. Now, I'll also tell you this. It's another big mystery that people have yet to figure out. When you change your frequency, you are then aware of a reality that corresponds to that frequency. Meaning that the frequency shift in the body is a vivid thing that changes all synonymous things, all connected worlds. So when you raise your frequency, there is a hell part. There is a hell part of the world, and there's a heaven part of the world. Basically, is what I'm saying. If you're in this low frequency, then you'll be in the Baghdad hood state of mind or area for a prolonged period of time until you rise out of that frequency. If you go into a higher frequency, your entire reality may metamorphosize, and you may find yourself in the redwoods, or you may find yourself in places like Costa Rica. So there is an actual frequency for every single part of our expansion here on Earth. There's nothing separate between these spaces. It's just about which one you're choosing to focus on and be in based on where you're at in your frequency. All this stuff is taking place simultaneously, if not just small portions of time away from each other. Obviously, the physical reality has a time lag. What you say doesn't necessarily happen right away. It takes some time to happen. But we need to start realizing that when we work into these higher levels of frequency, meaning the 6th and 7th sense, things above the vibratory frequency of light, when you don't expect to see anything because it's not visible, you can often feel it, but you can definitely expect for it to actually change the physical reality because you're actually working from the point that physical realities can be changed. But if you're working in the physical reality and you don't know exactly how to pinpoint and to do things that are going to change things on multiple levels, then they're not going to change. So what I'm introducing to a person, that's why I said before, if you master something, if you master heaven, if you master earth, you'll be able to understand both of them. So the person that just only understands how to clean out their body eventually understands how heaven works, because heaven is the body. So this is what's being presented by myself, but this is not something that is new to us. This is not something that we should not know and that we will not have to know. This is not some invention of something that I've just decided, hey, these two seem to go together, so let's put them together. I'm an entity here on this planet that is working on this expansion seriously. I've uncovered this stuff from ancient books and reading and experiencing long trips in foreign countries by myself, meditation, all sorts of different methods, fractal paths, experiencing and doing different things to get to a higher state of consciousness. but still the sense that we have as a child, which is knowing when you're going in the right direction and when you're going in the wrong direction. This is not something that some master needs to teach you about right and wrong. Like, we know what's expanding us and what's not expanding us. That's why the whole right and wrong thing is a farce, because it doesn't take someone to actually really teach you that. It's something that you know. Now, whether you choose to follow it or not, that's why I was saying about this choice thing. The universe presents all these choices. So, because that's what it's into. It's into energy. It's into combustion. It's into creating matrices. It's into bringing realities forth that infinite beings can continuously experience themselves. If it stops doing that for whatever reason, then we return back into a state where we're all sitting there in silence. There's no one talking to anyone because there's no one to listen. All beings are collected into one state. So we need to start figuring out which one we want, right? But I'll tell you again, you could have both of them. What we invented was, when we were in the physical body, we could pretend like we're separate. We can go find our exact mate. We can run around different things into the reality and create different things and experience that. And then when we finally got tired of that, we went to what we call sleep, which was just a bridge or a crossover into another world that we have full control of, in which everything was omnipresent and omniscience. Meaning that if you call upon, or you want to see, or you want to do something, you can do it right away. So we wanted both of those, so we got it. So like I said, the worst thing that can happen here on this illusionary porous planet called Earth is death. There's no such thing as death in the universe. It's only the gate into yet another more expansive life. So right off the bat, even how we judge things is not going to be the same way that the universe judges things, because it doesn't see the end. You see what I mean? It doesn't think. It doesn't have those kind of interruptions in what it's doing. Thinking takes time. When you see someone in a zone, they're not thinking. They don't think, I hope this ball goes in. I hope that one goes in. They're in another mode where there's no thinking. They just know it's going to go in. That's the mode that the universe is in, whether we can hang on or not. Look, I'm an individual just like everyone else, just like you said in the beginning of the conversation. I'm just telling you, I figure something out. Sometimes I get so excited about it. Even when I'm saying at times, I would say it better at 4 a.m. to myself. When you got to turn these cameras on and you got to try to explain to people the Innerverse, which is larger than the universe. Universe has limitations. Like they show you, right here is this last planet, and there's a certain number of planets here. That's all limitations. Now look, also, when you open your eyes, you're going to only see limitations. This is how you understand the difference between the external world and the internal world. When you open your eyes, you'll see the limitations, because there's certain things that are not here, that when you close your eyes and you know how to imagine properly, your imagination or your imagination, when you know how to use that properly, you can create things that are not here in this world, because it's unlimited. So that was kind of the rules. There was going to be a certain level of things that you can bring into this reality based on how much you can hold. It was like a load calculation. You can determine whether a 5-sense reality can hold 7-sense individuals very fast. So what happens, though, is inside. And that's why you don't see too many people that have come into this knowledge running around everywhere and showing people what they can do. Because everything that's associated with the higher senses, like I said, is moving higher than the vibratory frequency of light. There's nothing here in this world that is moving higher than the vibratory frequency of light that we can physically see. So science is automatically ruled out, because they only want to base things on what they can see with their little electron. And at most, they'll use some sensors and some electrons. Most of the nodes and the nadis and the chakras and things work in a level that's way too sensitive to be picked up by electronic devices. So the world, in following science, or Scion, has already put themselves into a trap. The first stage of this entire ladder is the moon. Okay, so the moon, the planets are indeed ladders back up the spine, the chakra center. The first ladder is the moon. The moon is always associated with the basic principle of regeneration. That's what you see. Farmers, they know that. They don't need to be rocket scientists to know that the moon's controlling the fecundating component on the planet. So when a person has wandered after the lunar god, or mass, or being related to that particular celestial body, of course, they are more fleshly. They're worshiping Ma, or a Ma sun, a Mason, as they show you on Flash Gordon. Masons living on the moon. But it's just the first step on the ladder, or also known as the lowered, meaning lowered, brought down. So that's the first step. You get past the moon, you either bank left or bank right. You go to Venus, Venusian initiation, or you go to Mars, the Martian warlike character initiation. You see what I mean? So all these manifest as initiations that we're going through, which is done by the universe. It's not done by some guy in a robe. You're being occultated now. So you bank left, which is basically your polarization of your body. You either run into the universal mother, Sophia, the wisdom of all things, or you run into the Babylonian whore full of lust, burning with passion. Venus is upside down as an external planet. You know, in celestial mechanics, they tell you that Venus is upside down, proving it's an upside down pentagram. The pentagram, of course, is related to Venus because it is the last womb that a person reincarnates to before they get to Earth. That's why it's next door. Then you have Mars and that whole story. You know, and there's a lot in that story. You have Marduk, you have Ra, you have the sun god, you have the bloody sun, you have the bloody ocean, you have all the red and all that goes with that. So as you keep going through these celestial bodies, they also still, instead of getting them out there as these external characters and archetypes, we have to start putting them back inside and saying, oh my goodness, the Venus heart thing, which you notice Venus's sign is a heart, love, is because it's the heart chakra. And it has to do with whether you're loving or lusting. Why Mars, which is the fire planet, has to do with whether you're noble and using Prometheus's fire for positive reasons, especially when you're plunging into Maya or an illusion or matrix, or you're burning up with war and you're continuously degrading yourself. You see what I mean? Likewise, when you move into other planetary systems, they have the same, I won't say the same stories, but they have the archetypical story as the organ inside of your body. Not as, you know, Hercules wrestling the two serpents is the middle point wrestling the two poles. So it's all of the astrotheology when you start, I mean, all of the spirituality, when you start to decipher it, you'll see astrotheology. Then on top of that, after you finish chewing up the Bible and getting out what's really in there and discarding it, then you have to start asking yourself, what do books like the City of Apocrypha and the Apocrypha and the Bell and the Dragon, the First and Second Maccabees, what do all these books contain? What are they talking about when they're talking about astrotheology? What does it mean to have a serpent in the temple? You see what I mean? But is it not the body the real temple? So, and then what does it mean to have temporal power over someone? You see, so all of these type of connections is what can keep you into the quest and keep you powered up on the energy of yourself and self-discovery, and then into completely going into realizing that all is self. This is all powerful. See, the person who divides, what I'm saying, David, is the person who divides is actually the weakest individual. The one who knows that their everything is the most powerful. They've already absorbed everything. It's like they ate it. The number 8. You can become infinite when you do this. Now, it's not about, some people think that has something to do with going and practicing everything and going and being a part of this. And generally, they choose to do the bad thing first. I knew it. I knew I needed to do dark magic first. I might as well get it out of the way. Okay, God, I want a girlfriend. You see? They're just looking for a reason to do the foolishness, the same thing that they already know is wrong. So you can't really, you can only suggest to these kind of individuals what they should do. But as I said, that we'll all come to a level of great knowing, whether we're witnessing it from other people. As this becomes more common, you'll see people switch over so fast. Who wants to be dealing with falsehood all their life? The moment the truth becomes available, they're going to know it's available because they can power themselves on it. Then they don't need a person like me to keep explaining it. They'll talk to themselves and say, oh man, that's why I used to live on Acacia Street. Oh man, this is crazy because my mother's name is really Mary. And it'll be all sorts of connections that show you that this universe is not, you're not just in the universe, you are the universe. And somehow we've gained the ability to do both of those simultaneously, and it's confusing the hell out of us. Like, we can't figure out, well, why would we invent death? Because death is the antithesis to life. It gives you an actual point of ending to start again. Like, okay, I'm going to start another one. I'm going to create another one. Okay, that one's messed up. Let me erase that one. All right, I'm going to try again. See, so when we go into it like that, then it opens up to us. It's like a flower in itself. It knows you're not scared of it. It's like, okay, he's not scared anymore. Let's show him what this thing is really about. But who is really talking to you? You. Who else could it be? Do you know every time that you look at yourself when you used to be a child, when you think about yourself in the past in that classroom, at times you felt that somebody was watching you and it was really you in the future? People are still not seeing that the computers became sentient about 20 years from now and start sending signals back into the past to individuals that could read those signals, telling them what to do and how to carry on and how to save the world, because they were already wired to only assist us, not to destroy us. You see, so this whole path that is painting itself now of darkness is actually the end, because the light, which is information in itself and its expansion in itself, has started to dawn on this planet. And this has nothing to do with Luciferian symbolism of, God's coming from another planet and mating with human beings and then creating a slave species. Stop. I mean, when is it going to end the buffoonery? There's no one here doing masterful creation but us. And you've seen that. You got a daughter now, right?
Yeah.
Right? So you see these people, they can me and you can make an S4, Sony Galaxy S4, Samsung Galaxy S4 phone. If we just had the right glass and the right machines and the right fabrication, we can put the stuff together. But when we go to making a baby, we are going to commit an act. But that act in itself does not give us any of the schematics about what we're about to create and how we create it. We just do it. You see how certain things are, we just do it. We don't need to know how to do it. It's the same thing with this massive level of expansion of who we really are. We are it. The greatest thing that could ever been accomplished on this planet, we do it with ease, with joy and pleasure, while they're still running around with this stuff that they're calling ultra complex, and it's not even scratching the surface. But yet they're trying to paint it. Oh, look, this is the new Apple. It's really sophisticated. Well, look, here's my new baby. It's way beyond what anyone's ever been able to conceive. And you know it's that way because no one knows what it's actually going to become. No one can really determine that. It's already hands off. You see, so this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It's about where we're actually, how we're seeing it. Because I started noticing after a while, we were just becoming really ungrateful. Here it was, we can read, and we had the internet, but yet we want to spend time reading any books. Somehow something will become more important. Well, I have to work. But when it's time to play a video game or when it's time to do something, we'll get it in our ear. You have to fight your way to the truth at times. So that way you deserve to receive it. In many tenses, like, I'm not telling people, listen, this is something important. I'm not telling people this is the easy path. That's not what I told you. What I told you is that just like anyone working out, if you start lifting heavy weights, eventually they're not heavy anymore. And then also it's very easy for you to pick up light weights that are like other people that have not been able to deal with the weight that they've accumulated. So this path is, in the beginning, it may be tough, just as it's tough to walk up a ladder. Also, likewise, if you walk up a couple steps and you fall down, it's not really much of a big deal. But if you go way up there and then you happen to fall down, there's more repercussions to this. So it has all the elements of adventure. There's danger. There's rewards. There's all sorts of components to this that make it a real multi-playing or multi-role-playing game, but a real one. So we have to ask ourselves, all the replications that have come into our reality, especially video games and things of this nature, are they not, as I said in the beginning, anything that ever gets power, anything that becomes important, is nothing but a replication of something that's taken place in the reality, proving once again that all is self. The only thing that they're doing is taking things from inside of self, the unlimited zone, eyes closed, imagining it, and then bringing it into 3D and acting like it's new. And it's new to individuals who don't have an imagination, while those who do have an imagination, meaning that they can actually project something and make something happen, they see that and they add it to their reality and they create something off of that. That's called birth. So anything that we gain, all of it, not anything, everything that we're experiencing, we're gaining something. That's just what's happening. So there will be a child from it, all of what we're gaining here in this planet right now. And that child we'll have to take care of. So while everyone is running off, I'm staying. Why everyone's trying to figure out a portal out, I know where all the portals are. And I'm choosing to stay present because I have the most power present. Now, this power is me being able to collapse the past and the future into right now, what I will become and what I was. Now you'll see why the word present is an anagram for the word serpent. It's because you see how they say the serpent is Ouroboros in the circle connects. So that means it's a cable. So it means it's serpent's connected with wisdom. Serpent's connected with books. It seems to know everything. These are all metaphors for showing a person that once you obtain a certain state of consciousness, you get your ring, right? And you get a ring, and then you figure out that that ring is not the only universe. There's more. There's unlimited. They're being created right now. There are those of us that have raced off. Other ones of us in our species tapped into the great energy, already raced off into higher states of consciousness, building worlds that we'll live in later on. And some people that are still moving slow will live in later on. So what I'm saying is that this is not something that has the limitations of me explaining to a person specifically what's happening. What I'm leading a person to is the door. What's on the other side is based on how much that they can really imagine, because it doesn't really have a limitation. So again, that's my goal, is just to get people to open up their mind a little bit. Sometimes, and like I said, in these conversations, I introduce some very strange concepts. But if the person can start playing around with that, it's like taking a fish out of a very small bowl and sticking him to a big giant ocean and saying, what if? What if it was really like that? What if you were really the universe? And then this is the interesting part to me. People are universes. I've already seen it. I've seen it within myself. I've already expanded into different things. And I'm still here. There's no place to go. And we have great work to do because we have responsibility. Now listen to this. All these kids, right? That's why most people are not ascending. Because they're in those kids. Likewise, even the act of leaving yourself, it just doesn't make any sense. But just what we're supposed to do with the world, we focus so much on Illuminati, we just need to put it back into the kids. When the Illuminati dies, it'll come back in the kid. And then hopefully there will be someone there that actually teaches that person in their most fertile learning stage how to get to the next level, how to leave reptilian state of mind, how to be in fight or flight consciousness, how to be so selfish where you're seeing only, how to not be so selfish where you're seeing only what's in front of you. Notice how Illuminati and all these characters, they seem to see only just their own little groups. That's a limited state of consciousness. You can map exactly where they are on the whole evolutionary chain of consciousness. And so we can't see them as above us then, but that's also why they have to pull us down so low to be above us. To exercise dominion over a being that is multi-talented, multi-hyperdimensional, you have to drag them into a state that you already have dominion over that state. So the dominion word then becomes domestication. The domestication then connects right back to Samaria with the king. The king then domesticating all the animals, meaning putting all the animals, taming all the animals. So then turning the people over to be like animals, like even woman is mentioned like an animal in the commandments. You should not cover your neighbor's house, wife, cattle. You put the wife in the same category as the cattle. So what I'm saying is in the sheep, these kind of terms, what it's saying is that humans have been instructed to live like animals so that demigods who only rule over the dominion of the animal kingdom can control them based on their urges and animal senses. So maybe if I just said that in the beginning of the conversation, we could have summed the entire conversation up. But that's exactly what we're talking about here. When they lower you and debase you, that's the only way. And that's just like somebody belittling you, making you feel down here just so that they can feel like they're up here. That's going on the most massive level. It starts in the religion by putting God way up there in the sky. That's high enough. They brought the sun god in. Like I said, nature wasn't working. So they brought the sun god in. The sun god so far away, sun god left. We don't know when the sun god is even returning. Then they took that theology completely away from it being something to do with the real physical sun. Now everyone's really lost because they have no light. So if you take a person's sun and you move it away from them, it's not inside anymore, it's in the sky, they can't light their own path. So this is why they need something. They need like a god or a crutch or an evangel or someone to, when they run into a situation that appears challenging, that they can just call on that. You see what I mean? But what happens when it's not listening? And that's why you see prayers get unanswered, because they're praying to a dead God. It doesn't really exist. There's nothing there. It's like pinging something and then it's not coming back. Because realistically, all the prayers that people are making should be answered by the real gods, which are us. Humans are gods. We already figured that out. So what does that say about praying? If people are really praying for gods to do something, that means they're praying for other human beings to do something. That's what's really happening, whether they even know it or not. And the reason why they feel like, again, that they're lower is because they've been debased and put into their animal state. That's what we're dealing with. And this takes thousands of years to do. It's all, again, it takes language and manipulating the language. It takes, from each point, mind, body, and soul. That's why they triangulate. They work the trilateral commission. Mind, body, and soul. The money, the army, and the spirituality. You see, they work in these kind of structures because they know that this is how the body is designed. So they don't have to, they deal with a blueprint, as Jay-Z calls it. The blueprint is a Masonic term of Hiram Abiff in the temple and all that are all basically blueprints to the body, which equal blueprints to earth, which equal blueprints to the universe. But guess what? There's places they can't go. Most places they can't go. It judges you. You can't even get above the higher vibratory frequency of light without having the proper condition. So do you see why they never made it over into the places that many people who don't know anything about what they know have already made it into? You see, that's what we really have to start looking at here. It's like this stuff judges you based on what you do, not the science you discovered. You don't enter into certain frequencies in this body anyway or any other kind of way except for having that vibratory frequency. Those are the cosmic laws. You're not going to break them like you're going to break a draconian law. And the draconian laws are designed to be broken. They cut up the snake. They break the laws all the time. But when you go to your cosmic law, man, you kill somebody today and watch them come get you by tomorrow. Because that's a cosmic law. You can't stop life and then restart a person's life and think that that's something that you can do without seeing some level of repercussions for it. You see what I mean? But so now this is what I'm talking to people about. It's like we have to see this thing an entirely different way in order to get the right spectrum of it. But it's here for us now. And I spent years, man. I spent 4 or 5 years just wading through this. Like, I've read the Bible 3 times. Like, I've actually read the Quran. I've even been an imam for a certain period of time. As a child, I read City of Apocrypha, Apocrypha, Jubilees, Bell and the Dragon, all those different documentations, and through the encouragement of my mother, who didn't keep us in public schools and things like that. And then I completely fell away from that. I went into business. I even went into gang relation for an earlier part of my life when I was being a rebel. Then I went into, I even went to prison earlier in my life for a year. So I'm not the model citizen. So when someone is asking, well, yeah, you were able to accomplish that because, and then they have something behind that, there's no because here. I only had it because I have a will to find out the truth. And I won't stop until I find it. And I got a taste of it at first, meaning that everyone's had either a dream they woke up from that was just too real, or something they saw in the physical reality that nobody could explain, or something like that happened. But in most people, which is unfortunate, just like a dream, they forget about it. After 2 or 3 weeks go by, they may have saw something run into the bathroom that didn't fit any geometry that we have been on this planet, like knowing it was something else. But after 3 or 4 weeks, watch, it goes down just like this. Some people ask me about some spiritual experiences sometimes, especially when I'm just in a closed session with individuals. And I'll explain to them some things and it'll blow their mind. But what I'll always say after that is, but the craziest part is after about a month or 2 months, you're almost back to normal again. And we become like paranormal junkies. If something's not happening amazing all the time, we start losing hope. We start feeling like, hey, I wonder if I did something wrong. Did I turn it off, or is it going to happen again? Or, you know what I mean? So this is what's attached to our forgetfulness. We do amazing things all the time. Like I said, even having a baby, if a person can feel like that all the time, even when you meet a person that is very significant to you, like that first couple days, man, you're working out, you're dressing nice, but so why does that fade away though?
And does that somehow have a connection with why all great things for us begin to fade away when we don't cultivate it properly? And so I started seeing like this, you don't have to be this wise individual to see just the obvious. Like I said, most farmers knew how to work out their spiritual vehicle because they dealt with earth. And a great deal of our body has to do with earth. So it's like if I always said there's a fire, like I told you earlier, there's a fire attached to your thought. When you meet someone that you're in love with and that you know that you're going to spend some time, or at least you want to, you have this energy to go and do things that you generally don't do. Where does that energy come from? So, and then why is it that we can't tap into that and do that all the time? And then when we figure that answer to the question, we'll see that until we learn how to do that, there's no difference between us and all these individuals that we're saying are doing wrong. Because, and we're saying are killing the reality, because we're killing the reality. The reality is all these beautiful people that were around you, all these family members that may have been left behind, all of the woman who has been with us, let me show you, woman has been with us for so long across time because she is a human being like us. So even when we're next to each other, it's almost like you got to do a reflection like, man, we've been in this. For how many aeons have man and woman been stretching across multiple planets playing the back and forth game with each other? Like that is beautiful within itself. So why we're sitting there all day trying to figure out how we're going to get back to this collective state and mad that we're not androgynous anymore, why don't we take a moment to appreciate the individual that's next to us that's made themselves available to polarize into a certain pole so that we can realize what that looks like on an external level. It's like someone having a session in a meeting with you, and then you're explaining to them all internal stuff, and they say, but what does that look like on an external level? Now, our reality is a place where it can literally be a place that can show us. So you can see what you've actually created here now. But just because you don't like it, that's another thing. And that's what we're dealing with in the world. We're seeing what we were able to create thus far. Now we want to change it. No problem. But because this is, again, realm mechanics, realm dynamics, somebody needs to grab the manual to the thing on how to change it. It's just like if I have a bad computer over here and it's a Mac and I'm working on it with PC disks, Windows disks. This is how we're approaching this. Some people are, like I said, you're trying to release yourself from the dominion, but you're not realizing the dominion is existing because your kundalini is still stuck in your coccyx. And then once it rises above your navel, then no longer does anything that is below the waist have dominion over you. This is everything. So there's no more person that's telling, there's no more job, there's no more boss. All those people disintegrate. And so that's what I was also telling people, like until you actually get to the control point, everyone around you is really a character. They're a character playing a role in your initiation. Because your understanding of the universe and Innerverse is the only one that's really going to matter here in a moment. Everyone is guaranteed an exit trip to this planet. It's not something that you got to fight for. Everyone will be leaving and going to something else. And this is what I need to also tell people about where you will be going. Now, when you are on this planet and you're going through this level of instruction, you start getting attracted to certain things. Unfortunately, many people become attracted to negative things. All these things make a certain emanation of light. There is no such thing as darkness. Darkness is only what you cannot see because you don't have the proper eye to see it. So what happens is that when a person starts to manage, oh my goodness, hold on real quick. Let me just catch this because this is the most important thing, and this is where I end the conversation today because it's heavily about this manifestation. You might have to remind me exactly where I was at in that conversation because this is one of those things that it closes the entire conversation.
You're just talking about where we're headed, basically, and how some of the negative things that we get attracted to might be pulling us back maybe into this experience or...
Okay, exactly. The attraction. Okay. Just remember that word attraction because every time I try to explain this, it gets removed from the mind a lot because it's, it's that kind of data. Maybe it's just moving faster than the speed of light. But the attraction that we have on the planet, which is kind of something that we learn while we're here. We start learning what we're attracted to, whether it's Nikes or it's nature, okay? So what happens is that each attraction does send off an energy signature. So it sends off a light. So we actually are now familiar with the actual light or the color of the light that we're attracted to, okay? Now, how this works is that, especially with people, when you look into someone's eyes that you're attracted to, because the eye is the gateway to the soul is emitting the light, there's a certain sparkle that happens right there, and you recognize it. And even you notice how when there's somebody that you may be attracted to or may be attracted to you, there's a certain look in their eye, right? So that look is actually a light. Now, let me explain to you what happens when you come out of the body. And it's now you're untethered, meaning that it's actually time for you to leave this particular corpus. You haven't been able to keep regenerating it, and so it's time to go. When you leave, immediately now this being that you go into, which is a higher vibratory being, but still not, it's still made of several layers, is like a magnet. And it immediately becomes attracted to the light that makes up its opposing pole. This is how we get back into an incarnation again. So when there are a group of people, and I'm working on data that may prove that it actually even happens with animals, that sometimes in such a lower state of consciousness, a human being can catch a portal back into an animal. And this is what the Queen and actually the Queen of England and people like that, they know about, and they engage in this kind of thing all the time with keeping people in a low state of consciousness so they can put them into an animal body and get them out of an actual physical body, or physical human body, right? So what happens here is, again, now the attraction, when you come out of the body, you rush to it, because remember, there's no time now. You've left the vehicle that is associated with time. And now you're in this space, which is like an elevator. That's fourth dimension. It's just going to take you to the floor that you need to go to. There's nothing really there. It's only a bridge. And anyone that's been to fourth dimension definitely knows what I'm talking about. It's just, some people see it as a space with a bunch of doors. Some people see it as only portals, but it's always the same thing. Some people see it as an elevator. Some people see it as an escalator. Some people see it as a ladder, but it's always the same thing, just from one point to the next point. So because there's no time. So once leaving out the third dimensional body when there's no time, now you immediately rush. This is the term that's given. You rush to the next incarnation. And this is why they say this is the trick to hanging around outside of time, if you can ever master this, is that you don't get overwhelmed by your attractions. You're never surprised by your attractions. Now, this, of course, leads into the deeper Oriental teachings about how to resist your urges. It leads into the point where you can actually pinpoint exactly what you're going to do and where these urges are coming from and whether you want to do it or not. So when you get out of the body, then if you're not surprised, basically, if you're not rushing to your next urge, you're able to stay into this floating space called fourth dimension and actually observe all of the going and coming of dimensions. So what we're talking about here, again, because that's still the maxim of it, is we're talking about the space where reincarnation takes place. When the human being comes out of the body says goodbye, untethers from the silver line. It then becomes not limited by anything that is limited by time. So then it moves into a space that is basically like tubes, which is the fourth dimension. That tube the actual tubes, as we were talking about earlier, of sound, emit a certain light that the person sees, is attracted to, which is based on what they were attracted to when they left off in the last life. And then they reincarnate back into that actual, that form of light. Now, if you want to see on the physical earth how that light is being made, it's being made just like fire is made on your planet. When you strike something together, it makes the light, it makes the spark, it makes the portal. And that's why when two humans come together, when male and female come together, bam, man, it's like two poles. Have you ever put two poles together of power and you see that spark in the beginning? And then they start to rub and friction. You know, everyone's familiar with the rubbing and friction. That creates the light that the being that is coming to incarnate says, that's where I left off last. That's where I want to be. That's who becomes my mother and father, or my lesson. That becomes the port that I come out of, because that's going to keep me going from where I left off of. And that's how the universe ensured that you go where you left off, because that's where you're attracted. So now we're living in a time where they're playing with that, David. They're playing with that. Some are hanging out just in fourth dimension and are not attracted to anything. So they're not even reincarnating.
Sorry, just to clarify, sorry to cut you off. So they're playing with that. You mean like us or the manipulating force?
The manipulating force is manipulating the fourth dimension.
Okay.
That the going and coming. Now, here's the manipulation. This is not spooky, weird stuff that you can't see. I never introduced spooky, weird stuff that you can't see. I can see it all, so I can explain to you where it is in your physical reality. In the physical reality, when they suggest things, like our whole reality is tuned into, like if you like Lady Gaga and you become attracted to Lady Gaga and you come out of the corpus and now you're disconnect, you're going to go into a family that likes Lady Gaga. And then because of just that whole arena of family members, that's going to shape and mold what you become. You see what I mean? So your family is like a farm in a sense that, or a garden where they're cultivating you too. They are the larger celestial bodies that are influencing you. Your mother and your father, your sister and your brother are celestial bodies that have a level of influence over you. So if you've asked for incarnation because of your inclination, which has been taught to you by someone else who is modulating the reality on a fictitious level, and then remember, this is 72 years, 60 years you'll be back around. A parsec, I can't count. It's higher than a Google, meaning that this level of years that we're spending in each of these carnations is still like a really relative sliver of time, especially when you're considering no time at all. So what we're dealing with is in these tunnels of time, we have all of these situations taking place that are shrouding us and burying us. And we're not seeing that control point. And this manipulation is not taking place on such a mystical level, more so than it's in the actions of things that we're being encouraged to do every day. So again, when we like a certain thing, then we're going to find ourselves back here associated with that. Now, this is not a negative thing, is if you know what to like. See, I'm not introducing something that is explaining why we're all trapped and why we never get out. No, I'm telling people how it's all hardwired. So when you become attracted to things that are actually really expansive, you guarantee yourself a one-way trip ticket when you leave here to a more expansive place. It's hardwired like that. There's nothing anyone can do to stop it, but what they can do is they can start to dictate where you go based on what they teach you to like. Right? The world is designed the way that it is because the ones that are in control of it want a person to reincarnate in a level that is lower than them so that they can have control over them.
Now, just to sorry to cut you off again, Sevan, just because we're running out of time, I just really want to make sure I get the terms right here. So if we've got the controllers of the fourth dimension who are ultimately controlling this physical 3D reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some. Well, to some extent, because we've been talking the whole thing about how anybody at any time, because they're their own universe, they don't need to be under that control. It's a choice, right? Just like everything else. So, but what are we talking about here? We're talking about, of course, I understand we're everything. Everything is us. There's interrelationships, but we're talking about aspects of consciousness that are physical first, just like we are, plus multidimensional. We're talking about
exactly.
So you could see it in a physical.
And only aware of a certain level of their physicality, or a certain level of their connectivity, because that's why I was telling you in the beginning that the most powerful person is aware that they're everything. That's the maximum. Yeah. Okay. Everything else in between that is only aware of a certain part of themselves, and there's ones that they are really limited to how much they know. The most they may care about is their little group or club. And then most of them only really care about themselves because they don't see anyone around them as actually being connected to them in any kind of way. It's the ultimate level of division. So, they'll see it as that they're as a smear of consciousness, meaning that you have people at every different stage. You still have these people that are actually at a stage where they don't see that everyone here in the reality is actually coming from the same source. Just like anyone, I can go downtown and find many people like this. I don't have to exactly find Illuminati that believe this. Meaning if I go downtown and I say, hey, man, do you believe that everyone came from the same thing? They're going to say, you mean like Adam and Eve? Isn't that just like a Bible story? No, it's like fact. Because of, if you just look at the world, look, man, because you have how many people in the world right now?
Well, they say 7 billion, but who knows?
Right, and it keeps growing, right?
Yeah.
But 2 years ago, what was it? It was lower, right?
Yeah.
So 1,000 years ago, would it not be lower?
Yeah.
And then 10,000 years, would it probably not get down to like one person? And then you're going to want to know where it is after that. But the Egyptians already solved it. And I'll say this because I know it's about time to end this conversation. Let me show you why this is an error. Well, let's put these numbers here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's just go to 6. Okay. Now, in our language or in our system, we have this number called 0. Okay. And then after 0, we get this other number called -1. These don't make any sense, because if you put negative $1 in the bank, how much can you withdraw?
Nothing.
So -1 doesn't exist. But what you do have is, instead of adding a 0, which is not allowed in this dimension, it means everything that is outside of the dimension. It means limitless, basically. You go half. Then you go, third. Then you go quarter. Then you keep dividing, because everyone knows that if you have something here, like a piece of paper, and we rip it in half, then we rip it in half, then we rip it in half, rip it in half, rip it in half, rip it in half. As long as we have the right device to see it and another device to keep ripping it, we can keep ripping it. Like, it'll keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It will never disappear. So this is what's happening in our reality when we're adding the 0, is we're not seeing that what's going on in this past area where we seem to cut off at, which is the first 2 beings. Now that I've proved that, okay, well, it's like a pyramid. Then we go all the way to this one point with this apex being. So then what happens? Then you see what does an hourglass look like? Right then, another pyramid starts to form, right? Like, look at it. I don't want you to lose this, because this is it. This is the key to it all. Notice how the triangle, if you look at this as the family tree, as you got more people down here, this is the 7 billion people that we got. As you keep going up, further back, 10,000 years, you get less and less people, until eventually you get to 2 human beings, then 1 human being. So where everyone is stuck is that they can't figure out what was before that. What was before that was no physical reality. See, once the whole physical, we are the physical reality, is what I'm telling you. We're the one creating this. We're the ones with the ideas of trees, and we're the ones with the ideas of animals. So before, when we all were on the physical level, but back into one being, where we branched out from there again was into the spiritual world. So you notice how they draw the design like this. They show it, and then it intersects, and then it goes back out again. Then it intersects, and it goes back out again. What I'm telling you is that where most people are stuck is they see this physical reality, and they may be able to rationalize that there were 2 or possibly 1 beginning being, but they don't know what's going on before that. But what was going on before that was the spiritual world. You see, in the spiritual world, all the numbers fan back out again, but basically in no numbers at all, like unlimited numbers. And this is the space that everything is coming from. So while we're trying to still envelop it and figure it out, it was never designed like that. How are you going to figure out the limitless? And this is what's pissing us off. We're trying to get our hands around an area that has no limited boundaries. If you go into the spiritual realm, there's nothing to say that's the end of the spiritual world, and that's the end, that's one end of it, and that's the other end of it. It's not like that on the spiritual world, but it's like that on earth. If I start from here and I go all the way down around the equator and come back, I'm going to end back up at the same point. I'm going to say, well, that's the end of earth. But see, that's where our limitations are. Earth is the limitation, but honestly, it's not a limitation if nobody's even figured out what's going on yet. Think about it. Everyone's puzzled about what's going on here. That means that there's a lot to learn. But if you really want to know what's going on beyond this, is the spiritual world. And guess what? It's always been going on. So when we start talking about they and them, we have to start thinking about how many people have left this world. How many different kind of souls and spirits are there? And where are they all at? And they're always coming and going. It's just now we've reached the stage, and this is what I was going to tell you earlier, and I'm glad that we got to this and I'm done. This is it. Now notice, when the energies come from the cosmic bodies that tell the animals and the other species that are in the subhuman state to propagate or mate, they do. Meaning that there's an energy that says it's time to mate, just like there's an energy that says it's time to hibernate. Okay? And these animals obey that. They don't resist. You don't see this bird like, I'm not going to migrate this year. I'm tired. It's humans that are doing that. They have this power to resist their urges, and that gives them this whole other vista. You see what I mean? It doesn't allow them to be subject under the dominion of the stars. It gets them beyond the stars. See, the vault of heaven is never changed. That's why it's limited. It was still a lot. They were having to figure out a lot of things, but it's still a limited zone. It never changes. It's like a book that somebody writes for you to give you some bearing on what's going on, but it's not everything. And we can't be mad that this is not it, especially if we don't like how it's running. This is optimistic then. That means there's other stuff. But I'm telling you, like, the key point is to see that once you leave physical reality, it opens up into a plane of an unlimited number of souls. And some people would like to say that soul is a great soul and just one. But every time it comes into a physical reality, it's divided again because, as I told you earlier in the conversation, it's going through the geometry of division and then reincarnating into vessels. Look at the division sign. It's 2 dots, meaning 2 souls or orbs, and then a line in the middle, meaning that one is not conscious of the other. This is the reason why you don't really understand who your dream character really is until you can control the dream and pick up a mirror and see it doesn't even look like you. If you pick up a mirror in the dream and you're actually at least in a plane closest to heaven and closest to the actual plane on earth, you'll see that the person that you're looking at is not you. But most of the time you're in, what is that, first person? So that's your first person point of view. But yeah, man, you see it can go on for a long time, but I think in the end of this conversation, we got to the meat of it. If people just grasp that you can't hold this down, then they'll start unlocking this untold energy because they'll break out of this whole mold of them actually getting to a point where they can limit it by figuring it out. The best thing to do right now is to get into action with what you're eating and what you're drinking and what you're putting into your portals, and then watch yourself expand. And then when you finally ascend into these higher states of the consciousness, that's when you can come back and help people that are dealing with parasites. And because those parasites that are plaguing them in the reality are something that they're still engaging with, and that's what's giving them that frequency change. Whether it's they're letting them make the laws for them, whether it's that they're eating the food that they're eating, whatever the case may be, that is the connection. So we can't be upset if the Eucharist, or meaning the communion that takes place with animals, we begin to engage in. Meaning that when you eat flesh, eat of my body, eateth of my flesh, my blood. This is all lower vibratory frequency talk. So you'll see that, again, lords of the earth have everything to do with sheeple and have everything to do with this entire shepherd concept, which is about animal farm and animals. Look, I'm your shepherd. Wait a minute, I'm an animal? You see the play? Because remember, the whole play here is to debase you. This is called the abomination of desolation. This means that the ones from the lower world have breached into the high throne and infiltrated the holiest of holies. So I will say this to you too, David. All of that knowledge that you did have when you were younger about those scriptures will come to serve you. Because once you really see how those same scriptures that mom, dad, sister, brother, whoever, uncle, cousin are stuck in are actually the same scriptures once someone comes with the real knowledge to free them, then it starts getting glorious again. Because some people haven't been able to access the same level of power that they've had since they walked away from that. Meaning that when you walk away from yourself, if this is Helios Biblius, the son book, and you're the son that's being written about in this book, and then you walk away from it, then you're the prodigal son then. When you come back to the kingdom, that means you came back to your senses. It doesn't mean you went anywhere external. It just means that you actually come into the realization that Solomon's temple is really actually the temple of the body. And in order to get these things going on again, you're going to have to make a couple sacrifices. And it may be the cows that go first. Meaning that, that they're always burning up the oxen and always burning up the animals. This is because it means that you need to get rid of and remove these kind of things from the diet because it always keeps you on a certain vibratory frequency. So thus it must be incinerated. That's what I'm saying. So notice how the interpretation of things is still in the mind, is still within the mind of the individual and how their filters are configured. And all I'm trying to show people is that the reason why they keep seeing all of this negative stuff going on in the reality is because the filters that they're actually using are tainted. And it's not the Illuminati doing that to them anymore. It's them still living in a body that they could have chose to clean out, but they don't even know what they're doing. And that's what I was saying again about bringing children in the world like our parents did and didn't even teach us how to clean our own body. So isn't that what the first thing you're supposed to teach your child is how to wash your own face and how to clean your own hands? That's what you teach a child. So, but that's external. You need to teach a child how to clean their organ, how to keep maintenance going on with the same vehicle that they're going to have to live with while they're in this thing. That makes sense.
So I guess the only, thing that was, I mean, because I also see the fact that this information was manipulated like you said, to keep people in an animalistic nature, to keep people capable of being controlled, because without it, they wouldn't be controllable, right? So the perpetration of what we call the Illuminati is the fact that, you know, there's just this encouragement of ignorance, and we still always have the choice. We don't have to feel victimized by this.
Well, I mean, there's two different kind of people. You have people that really, you know, much of the choice has been removed because they've been locked down. Because remember, the choice is removed when you get into lower parts of your animal body. That's what the whole thing is. Remember, the more animalistic you become, the more you're attached to your instincts. Instincts are not your choice. Okay? So what happens is there's a person that can be in an environment such as Darfur and be completely subject to England. You see what I mean? And whatever they want to do with that person. So it's important to not fudge on all the other people that exist that actually don't have much control left in their reality. But this is a result of the encouragement that came from none other than these characters they keep calling Nephilim, but were some of the first fathers. Not all the first fathers were the same. Just like you have one man that's a hunter. You have one man that takes care of nature. You have another man that seems to be only fascinated with electronics. You see what I mean? So you have these different kind of archetype men. These are called archons, okay? And then the chief of the archons, Yaldabaoth. All these are archetypes, meaning emanations and forms coming from a globe of a different spectrum, or choosing of a spectrum that you want to be in. So it's important to see that dominion starts to reign over a person's life after they go through incarnations where they continue to be lowered, right? And this happens because you know there's people that have died that didn't come into any spiritual levels of knowledge. And in fact, they may have become more tainted and dark. So when they come into an incarnation again, they will actually in many cases reincarnate on the degree line of where their energy is. Like, you know, the earth is also measured in latitude, longitude, and degrees. Mm-hmm. So as you see in the states of consciousness of the world, there's areas that have a higher state of consciousness, meaning the people are generally more in the crown chakra of their mind, versus there's other areas where it's just bombed out. It's always a war, it's always fear, it's always death. So that's what I mean by this whole grand thing. That's why you have to be able to kind of navigate it to a certain extent. It's not just straightforward in many cases. So, but yeah, I mean, that's really what we're dealing with. They can get dominion when they actually debase you 2 or 3 lifetimes. Then once you're under dominion, a lot of the power that you have is removed. Then you become like that tarot card where it shows the person is chained to the devil, meaning they're chained to the inclinations of the reproductive system only, which is 6, which is sex, which is Satan. So you see, it's only the reproductive principle, which is heat, fire, burning. Dogs go in heat. Canines, or Sirius, the dog star, Big 5. These are all terms that have been thrown throughout the ancient script several times for those that are wise to know what's being spoken. But again, it's still about encouraging your inclinations, yet because it's about controlling your inclinations, because some of them will burn you up. And that's what we're talking about. So any kind of hell concept is from when an urge gets to the point where it kills the physical body. You see, because now it's burned the physical body up. Let's say a person with a drug habit, that drug habit and the idea of getting it and the fire that's necessary to go and get it is consuming them. So once they get that drug and they keep getting that drug, then basically they burn up their body. Because notice how a lot of these substances and things actually activate something for a moment. And then it starts to wear it in, then it burns it out. So this is all we're talking about. We're talking about learning how to master these energies. Because remember, overall, you're a spirit inside of water. Your body is a big water bag, and your soul is pure fire. So you can already see the master level of creation. It's mixing fire and water, and you're just steaming all over the place. You're creating products and things as you go along anyway. And so the mastery of the vehicle, like Kuji-in, when you learn that the difference between ki energy, which is stored in the back of the brain, and getting too much of that, when this is what we spent our lives learning, not about Christopher Columbus. Not about, so all of it now seems very complex and difficult because we're having to put it over the top of, it's like trying to install, let's see, a PlayStation 4 game over a K-Pro or over Atari. It's not going to work. It's, you have operating systems that are completely conflicting with each other. So what do? You got to clean it out. So all you have to do is, you can see this anywhere, brother. And maybe the show is over, but this is for you. All what happens is that when you map out the situation that's occurring, all you have to do is flip it on the body and say, so how's that happening inside the body? Where's that? And man, you'll be able to find this uncanny similarity that will just, tell you exactly what's going on and how to fix it. And you apply it and it'll work. But still, like I said, when you start jumping out into the reality, then you start incorporating other people that are also lost in the reality. And then you're basing everything that you're experiencing on a collective. Wow, I mean, you really are going to make it a lot more difficult for yourself to really find out what's going on because you can't hear what that person is thinking. That's why I said, like, another person may be under the urges of the serpent. So the serpent is speaking to them, but you can't hear what it's saying because you can't hear what a person's thoughts are. So then when you're seeing that they're experiencing negativity and they're experiencing bad things, you still don't have all the information about why they're experiencing that. Surely there's a cause and effect. And that's why I say there's a lot of responsibility in cleaning up that needs to go on because some of the fathers were filthy. Their involvement with this planet was only really on a negative, plundering type level. And then they taught that to their children. And this is a hunter. That's why Orion is Hearn the hunter, and he keeps his dogs.
So you're speaking about the Nephilim there with the fathers, you mean? Or what we call the Nephilim in the ancient text.
Exactly. We're talking about what they call the sons of God, which are, basically raised. They have different levels of characteristics based on kind of how they emanated, just like a person has a different way of being because of their zodiac. So this particular zodiac of Hearn the hunter, who's also God, who's a dog. That's why God is dog backwards. I mean, you got to pay attention to all this stuff here because it's all there. When you're dealing with this Syrian mystery, that's why Jesus went to Egypt and all that. You're dealing with Anubis, and that Anubis is, of course, now the Anunnaki. So it's still Anu. It's the same entity. So what you're dealing with is, again, it's kind of like an archetype, but it's an archetype that when people choose to take it, like Rome chose to take this archetype of dog gods, they have in their stories the story of Romulus and Remus. Their kings were suckled by wolves. Now, remember, a dog is a wolf. A dog is a domesticated wolf, right? So if you read, dog is a domesticated wolf. So when you look in Rome, you'll find that there was a cult of wolves, like meaning that the actual secret society then, you'll see it on the Assassin's Creed 3, they were a wolf gang. And that's where the whole werewolf and all this stuff comes from. But it means basically all the characteristics and traits. Sneaking up on you at night, blood, traveling in packs, plotting. These are Jesuits, okay? So the entity that they idolize, we're not saying that there's some God that's hyperdimensional that they tap into. We're saying that there's a hyperdimensional energy that they channel and they become. To become a snake, act like a snake, cold-blooded, sneaky. You see what I mean? So to be a wolf, act like a wolf.
So the energy, sorry to cut you off, so the energy's there, and there's just certain physicalities or physical beings that are conducting that energy, and they might be from what we call human, our physicality, it might be from somewhere else going, whatever, whichever.
They're from human. They're humans. They're from our physicality. But just because, like I said, no human is the same. They're in degrees and measures of these energies. So if a person, like I'm saying, it's a cult. So it's a culture or a petri dish. What they're doing is that in the initiation, they cultivate the person and they make them the way that they end up becoming out. So if they're practicing one trait, let's say if they want the person to come out like a wolf, i.e. wolf in sheep's clothing, if they want the person to be like that, then they take them through all the levels and cultures of a wolf. They leave them in the dark, they abuse them, they don't let them have a mother, they do all of those kind of things. And then they end up coming out in a certain kind of way. And because they're that way, they're emitting that energy and they're teaching other people to be in that same energy and that same frequency. The only thing that we've done with being able to isolate it to the poor old wolf, who's still trying to figure out how he's involved in this, is that we've zoomorphied it, meaning that we've come up with another explanation or a trait, like when you say like an owl, or when you say like a wolf, when you say any type of nocturnal being, this is the being that acts as if they have no sun. meaning that this being is acting as if there's no sun or soul. You see, so when these folks carry out acting like owls and acting like nocturnal animals, they're acting like they have no soul when they do that. You see what I mean? So you just have to look deeper into the metaphors that are really being said, because what you'll find is you'll find that what's taking place is not so mystical, but it's still taking place, and it's causing a great deal of mysticism, meaning that mysticism in this tense being mist, something that you don't know or something that you can't see, something that's supposed to be illusionary or magical. And because it's operating outside of your view, because we're not looking inside. And we're not seeing that if a group of men decide to basically run around and act animalistic and do animalistic things, then they are now a pack of animals. And now their energy and the essence, they may take on like a totem. They may dance around at night with the skins on. There's no telling what they would do. It's just like watching some people that are drunk and in revelry and acting all crazy out at the bar. There's no telling what they would do. But in the old days, man and woman were so much more powerful because everyone was still inside of them. So all these 8 billion people 20,000 years ago were all in one person. You see what I mean? Like, so that one grandma and grandpa that were walking around were carrying thousands of humans inside of them at one time. But guess what? We're actually doing it now. We have thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of organisms inside of our body, all living off of us, some at states of consciousness and some at a state of consciousness of reasoning, and some just strictly instinctual. The ones that are at the state of consciousness of reasoning actually know how to get what they need, while the ones that are instinctual, they demand what they want. So you see, it's like, I may be getting, I'm continuing to dive into the corpus, but maybe we need to, pull out of it at this point. But not that you don't understand it, because I think that this is something that it takes just time to lay back, and maybe as you hear the interview again, also compare it with other things that you know, and then you'll see that each chunk of it gets you to a state of even perfecting what I'm saying, where you're doing it to yourself and basically saying, I can see how all this stuff really even connects. With just this external reality and who we keep blaming things on, and how that can really be us, and how we'll never get to it as long as we're assuming that it's not us, and how we give it a lot of power by making it on another planet and making it something else that is really not, because then the only thing that we'll be chasing is an illusion. So they say, kid, you're chasing your dreams. This means that any dream, whether it's a nightmare, if you imagine something as something that it's not, and then you go headlong in that direction to fix it, but that wasn't the problem in the first place, where are you going to end up? Back to square one. So I'm telling people the problem is you, so you don't have to go all the way out downtown to Mars, to some astral trip. You can do it right now in your room, because that's the only place it's going to be done. So we close down all the foolishness, because there's still a lot of people out in this spiritual energy that are playing games, and they're also playing games because they don't even know this knowledge. But the rest of them are playing games because they're still trying to survive off of this message and trying to eat off of it. And they just got to say something fascinating, like they were laying on the floor with a cold alien being, and it was on top of a ship, and they were being probed. So that kind of idea and that kind of way of producing things, it doesn't mean that can't happen. Anything you focus your mind on can manifest in a 3-dimensional reality from a carbon-based life form. But that doesn't mean that it's going to get the next man and next woman to the stage in which they need to be to, so that they can get to the day after ascension. I mean, the day after we're scared of aliens, after we're scared of dog gods and Vaticans and Illuminatis and all the rest of these characters that keep popping up, that we are. And what I'm saying is that just because you have part wolf in you doesn't mean you have to go acting like a wolf all damn day. This is the problem. It's just like anything. Choosing to focus on one way of being and not realizing that you're everything is limiting your power. Now it's got their power pretty much powered out. They have to go and use other people's power now. Now they're trying to spread it to us so that we just can think about them all the time and incorporate them in everything that we do all the time. And there goes Illuminati on the... They're making us try to make sense out of nonsense. We still watch the movies these days trying to pick out what the esoteric message that Hollywood is sending. Hollywood's not esoteric. They don't know the knowledge. The ones that are in there now, or they're making it up as they go. The original level of Hollywood, when they started it, was of course based on magic and tarot and holy wood and a pyramid inside of the Hollywood mountains. And then Oscar sitting up there, he's Osiris, that's really Osiris there, and all the stars on the sidewalk and all that. But that's like the remnants. of it. They build it like that so it'll last. It has a mysticism to it, as I said. The symbols, nobody knows what they mean. You know, all that kind of stuff is what keeps things going, but going where? In confusion. So this is what we're talking about. We gotta turn this Taurus back in and start to apply it to figuring out where these characters in our body, because that's, if you look in the Hindu scripts, they show each chakra with the character there. And that character's long teeth and, you know, and certain traits and certain weapons and things with them. And the reason why they did that, because of course the Puranas, Arunja is on the battlefield. The battlefield is his body. All the different chakras that he passes through are the challenges that he's facing. Some people think only challenges with the chakras are the challenges to actually have courage and have no fear. There's one chakra that's strictly about compassion, and many people have never risen above that. So each chakra is corresponding to a certain trait, and that's, you know, how you have to climb the ladder. But just because you're dealing with people who've gotten stuck somewhere in the netherworld, don't expect to be able to see anything in them that gives you a remote resemblance of you. See, that's why we can't still recognize that these people are us, because they're in a stage that was so long ago we forgot. But if we would remember that whole totality of remembrance is seeing that, man, this dude is just like me, but he's like 10,000 years old, 10,000 years behind. He needs to upgrade. Let's not even listen to him. Let's put them all in an energy chamber and get rid of them for a while. Let's put them in there and let them dissolve themselves into something greater. And we have the power to do that. So remember, all of what I'm telling you today about activating the human vehicle and that the body is really a universe is what we forgot, and nobody's even remembering right now or wanting to remember. The moment that starts to happen, I won't say nobody, actually a gradual group of people are starting to remember that. Once that starts to happen, these people have no dominion. Their whole dominion resides in us acting like animals and them being able to master animals. Once that's over with, there's nothing else to master. They cower then. There's nothing, they can't even harmonize with the same exact frequency. There's been a complete takeover. So, you know, some people are trying to wonder how it's going to happen, wonder if the world's going to blow up before it happens. Man, look, the world's been here for billions of years. It's not going anywhere. Some people say, well, we'll be going places before the world does. That's not true either. One form or another, we'll still be here, still working to graduate through this. So we just have to see again how this is really deep. It's just as deep as your mind is capable of going. It's very adventurous. But it's something that you got to be serious about at times. You get your will together, and then you start watching your portals, taking in the proper intake, and then get with other people that are also emanating that energy. That's another major thing. If you're on this certain frequency, you now need to charge and stay on that frequency. But if you're with people that are on a lower frequency all the time, you have no place to charge. This is like an object that's foreign to this planet that's trying to use electricity to charge it up from a planet that doesn't even have anything like electricity. You got to find the charge up for the state of consciousness that you're actually on. And that's why we created AstroQuest. That's why we created the Resistance, etc. Because there's different states of consciousness that we service and that we allow people to interact with each other so that they know that they're not the only ones on this information and experience that they're actually having, that we're all in this together. And so that's a real thing. And so as soon as one of us, remember there's 7,000, now going on 8,000 people, that's 16,000 eyes. So as soon as somebody sees something that's much more expanding, they're going to introduce it to us. And then we're going to introduce it to the platform. And then we keep expanding on that knowledge. So that's how we've gotten to this level. This is 4 years consistently into deciphering who's who, what's what. You know, whether in reading pretty much everything that's available out there that's worth taking a look at. And then finally getting to the meat of this and starting to see the consistencies. And then, of course, getting some of the vaults of the ancient knowledge, and then now seeing that, oh, okay, I see what this whole thing is about. It's about me. This is all about me. Like, it's all about what I'm going to do with this. And that's what's up.
Wow. Well, this was definitely mind-expanding, Sevan, and I just want to thank you for your time and for your energy. And I can tell you could go for another 3 hours or whatever here, but this is great.
Man, at least, I mean, I could easily go and just, keep going over it and making it more finite. And obviously, I've done that several times on different shows.
Yeah. So people should
definitely. But each time, though, there's always something new, too.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, people should definitely check out more of your work and listen to some of the other presentations and interviews that you've done, and keep following along, and just keep, I just want to encourage people to keep that open mind, keep searching. Like you said in the beginning, it was truth that drove you. It was the serving of truth. And so that's always what I've been driven by as well. And so I just want to, thank you for bringing your truth here tonight, Sevan, and for expressing yourself. And, maybe at some point we can do it again sometime and hack into this matrix a little bit deeper. But
definitely, man. I think we got 3 hours and 20 minutes, and that's more than enough. Obviously, I'm going to have Jason go over some things and see how much we can move around. But yeah, man, obviously the last thing I want to say in this conversation is obviously a great deal of this information we're of course excited about, because a lot of this is a brand new revelation, for lack of better terms, for us. But the work now is to put it into a real curriculum. So that way it's not where the person is not really understanding what's going on or doesn't know where to start. And it's very easy. Again, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you just need to understand what every correspondence to the body really is on a hyperdimensional and an astronomical level, which we have the data for that. We're just compiling all that now. And so that's what we're talking about. So people should look forward to in the future that maybe if this just completely, was out in left field for them or right field, that to look forward to is still look into our platform, because I can tell people more than anything, this is it. Out of all the stuff that I've studied for years, like even since a child, this body of information that I'm presenting now is the collaboration of all that information. It brings the height of that information. So it's just an important time to tune into it, because it will be really the only time that you ever need it again. You only really need to jumpstart and wake the system, especially as a seed growing, one time. And then, you tap into seeing what people are mostly time yet to believe, which is, these other spectrums.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. We'll keep doing your work, Sevan, and
for sure.
We'll look forward to hearing more about that in the future. And I just want to once again thank you for the talk, and just want to wish you a great, I guess, your evening coming up now too.
Evening.
It's evening.
About 10:41.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting close to 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna head to bed.
Okay.
But thanks again, Sevan.
Pledge allegiance, meaning to say that everything that they are and what they're about is now at the disposal of this flag of 50, at least that was then, pentagrams. And because the pentagram in itself, like the first thing that any alien would do if they landed on the planet and start seeing all these pentagrams around here, they would say, well, what does this symbol mean that everyone is using? And then still what you would find is that every person that you ask, it just means a star. But when you really get deep into the occultism, spirituality, realm dynamics, geometry, etc., you find out that the pentagram is the symbol of the actual geometry that it takes to trap or pin in a spiritual being inside of a physical or fire-like body, a slower vibratory frequency. Because what we're dealing with is, now you see the sun way out there. Let's just take that as an instance, even though it's not good to use too many external objects if you're looking for the truth of what's going on inside. But if you see the sun out there, it's really far out there. But every single thing that is in between would then be an emanation from it. Like as we get further away from the sun, things start to coalesce more and slow down their vibration. As they get closer to the sun, they actually move into another vibratory frequency that is not visible by the eye. And the reason why that I'm pointing this out is that we have to begin to see that when they call this symbol the blazing star, what they're talking about is one of the deepest levels of cosmogony that was ever uncovered on this planet, which was how we got into physical bodies and what they really are. And how that ties into our urges, meaning fire in Chaldean, and how that same fire, or what we call passion and desire, is basically turning this world and powering this world as if it was combustion. And this is why you see the pentagram in the ancient Chinese and Oriental systems before you ever see it make it to the flag in a new country like United States. They're still using the old system. But this system, if you understand how it works, then the pentagram only becomes, or the body only becomes a trap when you don't know how to get out of it. Anything only becomes a trap when you don't know how to get out of it. Anytime before then, it's a vehicle. Even if it's a cage, it's a protection unless you can get out of it. Notice how if you go into a really tough neighborhood and then you're in a house and it has a cage up around it, then that's going to keep everything out. But it will be a prison to you if for some reason you can't unlock the gate and get out yourself.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's like your protection. So what I want to introduce people to today is the end of dualism, because that's, of course, much of this combustive power in the wrong direction is based on dualism. But we're trying to simplify or solve, meaning soul, the sun. We're trying to solve all of these hindrances and these breaks in our understanding of exactly what's taking place in not only the universe, but also the universe. So when you're dealing with the pentagram as a symbol, you're saying volumes of information. It doesn't mean it's the supreme, because it's still a piece. In fact, it's the ultimate epitome of peace. Like it's combustion, so it's continuously dividing itself. Notice how in the reality we have thousands of trees, thousands of insects. Everything here is about division. So you have to see in this kind of planet, what is causing division? Where's the machine that's doing that per se? And what we'll find is that the pentagram in itself as a symbol symbolizes the combustion that takes place when wood is trying to beat water. Water is trying to beat fire. Fire is trying to beat. You see this whole Power Ranger approach to the entire reality. You see, power is in there because the symbol itself equals power, but what kind? And this is always what naive beings may fail to ask the question of, like, if someone offers you immortality, not asking yourself if you're just already immortal and they're giving you something that you already have. You see what I mean? Yeah. Or when you're trying to decipher a symbol, getting multiple explanations of something that still would take volumes to speak on, but someone's resolved it in something like 2 or 3 seconds, just as something simple or non-connected to things. And so this is what I mean by a universe, because a universe is a university, right? It's a place that you learn, right? So whenever we're tired of learning, it doesn't matter because we're still in a university. But the other key to this word universe is that it's uni, which means united, and verse, which means against. How does this work? It means the word itself is even an oxymoron. It's combusting and tumbling upon itself. But what it's really saying is united, just like the body, because the body is the real universe, but in conflict, because surely the liver is not the heart is not the spleen, and then there's always a war because the mouth may eat something or drink something that totally infuriates the liver. The eyes may see something that calls the gonads or the lower areas of the body to burn up in passion, rather than burning up the byproducts of waste that they put in their body from food and things. So do you see, it's like we're literally in this magnificent vehicle, greater than anything that we've ever created, especially iPhone 4 or 5 or Galaxy S4 or any of these devices, something that we're living in, we're even creating in, but we don't even know the entire process to. Why not look into that? And I know that may be skipping the title or subject a little bit on that line, but why not look into ourselves to actually find out what is really going on here, but really do it based on some kind of system. And so that's, of course, what we're introducing today, but it won't be an introduction as if it's something new. It'll be ancient knowledge restoring itself to its proper place inside of a person. So I'm going to definitely let you to build a little bit, man. I know I get on these tangents about it, and we can get a lot more specific about some of the stuff that I mentioned, even because I made into bringing anything into existence in a physical reality. You could just go check your science books about what they say about carbon 666, 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, etc. Then you can see even from that level why when people say something, it has a level of manifestation or power to it of something that could occur in three-dimensional reality. And then the only thing that would weigh if this occurred right away or if this is something that took a long time was more or less the will or the intention behind the words when they were spoken by the individual. So generally if someone says, "Ooh, I'm going to really get that job," then they seem to get the job more so than the person that says, "Hopefully I get the job." So all of that is that's the conducting of energy and how fast we're able to actually manifest something. Now, of course, there's many monkey wrenches in the game, which we'll talk about during this conversation, which is what happens when you're saying words, which are worlds, and all of a sudden, what you think that you're saying and what you think that you want to manifest, you actually are not even getting close to saying the tones, the rhythms, the vibrations that are associated with that. And so that, of course, gets us into the deeper parts of this, which is, where does that inversion come from? How, when we say something, do we even almost ask for opposite than what we truly intend? And obviously today we would have to get into the mother church, or basically the surrogate mother Cersei, and how religions are set up to actually make a person not think. We'll have to get into exactly who created this particular language and what it's created for. And actually, we can actually start there. If we think about language, we have to understand that now language is based on writing, of course. Writing is based on spelling. The spell is just a word used within magical practice. There is a writ, as you see in the word writing. That's often used in magical practices as the word ritual. You have curses or cursive, and you can automatically remember your teacher standing over you, making sure you do the cursive writing right. So what we have is basically a complex system that, while everyone's looking to MK Ultra and everyone's looking to all of these different newer versions of subtle mind control, the original firmware program is not even being examined at all. Meaning, why is it that we're choosing to use 26 characters in our language? Like, why not 30? Why not 50? And does it have any significance? And when we start to ask questions like that, just not chumping these people off, for lack of better terms, but and saying, no, they're stupid, they don't know how to do things, they're evil. Let's look at deeper and see, well, why is it that they're doing things this way? Is it based on some kind of firmware or hardware or system that we're actually running on that controls us and that we need to know about if we're ever to break our way out of the pin? So what happens is that if you ask yourself that question, you'll find out that 26 is a very significant number because when you take 26 and you times it by 2, you get 52. And anytime you start seeing these numbers, you realize that you're dealing with even what modern day calls the tarot. Because, of course, the modern card deck is modeled after the tarot, and there's 52 cards. But there's also, the tarot is modeled after astronomy. So there's also 52 weeks in a year. So what you start to begin to divine after a while is that it's highly possible that the English language is only halfway revealing itself, meaning that you have half of a circle of a disc. Because remember, we talked about earlier how most languages, they connect from the beginning to the end as if they're like a circle. But here we have a language with the English language where it's basically half of a circle. And trying to get half of a circle to turn and cycle in your mind or in a system that is completely cubic, cylindrical from that nature, it's going to be very difficult for it to occur. And so what we find is that, again, we're speaking these words and we're engaging in speech and we're letting it take us to multiple levels. And this is where, if you remember in the biblical text, it says the tongue and the mouth really is what was being spoke of, is really the most dangerous organ, most powerful organ in any sense, that it can set the whole body ablaze. That's what the actual scripture says. But what it's saying is, on multiple levels, is as above, so below. What you're actually saying pretty much determines what you do during the day now. What you put in your mouth determines how your whole body feels. So in every tense, what goes on in this top part of the body is what is going on in heaven. Because every single thing from an operating standpoint, and especially in one of the major internal portal points of our body, is in the head. So we have our nose in our mouth, which we take in the breath. We have our ears where we take in the sound. We have our mouth where we take in, again, the food. And so these particular orifices, if you start to map out the body as in itself being a universe, not just a map of the universe, you start to see that what we're really dealing with here is a war. A war from our lower body, and this is hidden within the riddle of Michael fighting the dragon, but it's really Michael, or the bird man, the angel, the higher state of consciousness, above the head, above the water, warring against the ideas and the urges from the lower body. Nothing external. And so, getting back to the beginning of this conversation, when we talk about this interpolation, when we ask ourselves, where did it really come from? It came from the actual inversion of the spiritual scripture. All religion that you see now has defaced the scripture, especially, it literally defaced it, taken off the face of who is the mystery person that they're talking about in Helios Biblia, or the Holy Bible, but Helios Biblia meaning the...
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, Sevan, just once again, before we start our discussion, I just wanted to thank you very much for the work that you do and for taking this call with me tonight. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I am just a regular guy, and I started doing some research about maybe 10 years ago, specifically into some of the situations that are going on globally. And of course, as you know, it's quite the rabbit hole. So maybe you start on the outskirts of the rabbit hole and then you start working your way in. And so I've just been learning from some very great teachers, people that I respect, and just trying to collect information that has inspired me and that has helped me raise my awareness. And then all I'm trying to do is just pass that information forward to other people. And I'm actually kind of glad that tonight we get to have this conversation without any commercial interruptions. We can go as long as we need to get this message out clearly to people. And so I'm very excited to be with you. So just once again, thanks for coming on with me today.
Oh man, I mean, the pleasure is definitely on mine. Obviously, it's something that I really want to do more than anything, is expand consciousness. And just even for me to have the opportunity to do that is more than thanks enough. So again, I just, passing the thanks back and just saying, thanks for making yourself available and being present. And that's, I guess, all that's necessary these days to really get some expansion going on. So obviously during this conversation, it's going to get I get a little excited, especially about the message. It does have that kind of power attached to it. And I think that it will be something new for everyone. There will be something new in here. But like, as I said, it should ring just as familiar as any truth. I'll say it like that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And you know what? In reviewing the notes for tonight's discussion, I'm very excited about these specific topics that we sort of selected. And I grew up originally I was actually raised in a very fundamentalist Christian background. And I was very much as a young child in a prison of fear and guilt. And there was a lot of other factors involved. And so at a very young age, I personally was forced to either lose my mind, basically, or go out and actually search for some true answers that made sense to me. Because for whatever reason, the information that I was given, it didn't resonate with me, even as a child. And even though everybody around me was trying to force and impose a particular perspective on me, I don't know what it was, but maybe it was just coming from within. There was just this voice that just kept telling me to keep seeking and keep searching. And I just kept doing that, and I've never stopped doing it. And so to speak with someone such as yourself that has such an in-depth knowledge of all the different dimensional aspects of this, which is very, very interesting, where we're not just focusing on only the physical, we're bringing all those other elements in. And that's what I really appreciate about your work. And so I'm very excited to get into that with you today. And I guess we should start off with, when you look around at the world and the situation that people are in, we've got a world where everything seems to be inverted. It's presented in a particular way to sort of appeal to people's conscious and subconscious, but at the same time, it's the inversion of truth. And nothing is more obvious than actually even the language that we use, the language that is used in the media, the language that is used by the politicians or the world leaders, the language that is used especially in religion. So maybe we can get into like the etymology and understanding, how they're communicating with us and how it's inverted, and kind of maybe go from there.
For sure. I mean, it's definitely, it feels like home going into the etymology subject, because that's a major part of how I began this level expansion for myself, as the words began to come to pieces, as I often see them as just parts of an explanation, but never the whole thing. First, even before we get into etymology, I just really want to talk about also just when you see anything in this reality, because obviously we got to tear this thing entirely down tonight, and then we got to build it back up, which is the best way to do anything, because that way we can see how it works, and then we can see why it's working the way that it is right now. And I think that what will get us into that is really first talking about how everything that you see in the reality that is powerful is designed like the body. So whether it's a government, whether it's a hierarchy, whether it's a corporation, also known as an entity, all of the designs that you see behind complex structure in this world, especially if anything's supposed to endure, it's designed after the body. And this comes from really just men of wisdom that would look at the body and see that because it continues to run, because it has long life, because it's so fascinating, because there's many riddles about the body that we don't understand, just even us being here, that if we model things after the body, then we would come to some level of success, and we would actually connect ourselves with something greater. So the beginning of all of the knowledge begins with the body and the understanding of self. What we get after language is created and things of that nature is wholly subject to what exactly alphabet or the cabal really means. And what that really means is that that first letter of the alphabet is supposed to connect to the last letter of the alphabet like a cable or cabal. It's actually the same word. And this cable, like if you can imagine the front of a cable and the back of the cable and then connecting them, you can see it makes like a circle or a ring or a disc. And so this is automatically to insinuate that all language is something of a disc or information database that goes into the mind and begins to spin. And then from that spin, it begins to generate the things that are associated with it. So when a person is saying things, and we were even talking about this deeply yesterday, about when a person is speaking, they're breathing out carbon. And because carbon is such a major component, sun book. Where did this sun book come from, and where is the originals, and does this bear any witness to the originals? We get deeper into finding, especially because of the Abrahamic tradition spreading into all religions, if you study them deeply, that Abraham is synonymous with Abraham, and Sarah is synonymous with Brahman's wife Saraswati. So there we have Genesis and the major characters encased as the beginning of a Hindu book. But then when you speed all the way to the end of the book to Revelations, we find that Revelations is written as another Hindu text about the 7 chakras. Of course, the 7 churches of the 7 chakras. The seals that break the seals that are broken open, none other than by Kundalini rising up through the body and activating the higher senses. So it wasn't put together by John on the island of Patmos, is what I'm telling everyone. It was actually put together by Apollonius of Tyana. Now, this kind of knowledge was well known for a while. So before we entered the Dark Ages, everyone already knew, because they were connected with nature, what the truth was. So this is why you get the original faction that is causing most of the problems as becoming what they call Mother Church, why they take the role of basically a man in a skirt, a surrogate mother. And it's because they are trying to emulate first, before they delivered the sun god myth, they had to emulate nature, because that's what everyone was eating from. It was like you couldn't really get into rhetoric and reason with people back in the day. They wanted to know where their food was coming from. And that is what they gave their attention and time and energy into, so they can keep that going, just like anyone with some sense. So they didn't desecrate the world and act like the world is dying and dead and in sin and needs to be punished and all of that. That would be like destroying your foundation that you had to stand on. It was almost insanity. So do you see how back in the old days, some of the concepts and the topics that we believe in so heavy, as far as the millions of people believe in, won't make any sense, because they don't have a slew of things that we have and we're presented with right now, as far as a simulation or synthetic things that are fake, things that can bring you happiness but have nothing to do with your actual real happiness, overall health, etc. And so what we get into then is we find that there is a perpetrator. There is something that is back there that's driving humanity into what would be oblivion if what is already occurring now was not taking place. There is a stage and multiple stages of activation that many people are participating in right now that supersede things like the date of 2012 passing. There is a massive level of expansion reaching many people on the planet right now, and it's about to spread even more. So that's just what's happening. But we do at times have to reflect. That's what we'll literally be doing. Reflect back to the past and see exactly how this is put together so that we understand how to get other people out of this situation. So what was occurring is that, again, this indigenous knowledge about how the earth works, how celestial bodies work, how other glands that are calcified, we don't use anymore, etc., work. That was the knowledge and the information that if anyone tried to write down, that's what they were writing down. So it would take an entirely different regime to come through to get rid of all of that information. So when they first entered with the knowledge, they entered as mothers and bringing forth knowledge of herbs, bringing forth knowledge of different miraculous powers and potions from nature. And that's how what you're calling Jesuits, what you're calling the Vatican, etc., those factions got their foothold. But as time began to pass, they were still losing too many followers in this foolishness. Because there's one thing that happens when someone starts to explain to you about the herbs and the healing things in nature and how nature works. You eventually see very fast that, well, shoot, the person that's telling me is not the one that is generating all of the power. It's nature. Thanks for telling me. I'm going to nature. So in the beginning days of this church, as they're calling this surrogate church, they were still so close to the doctrine of nature that they had to choose to move away from that because it was still not serving the purpose. So this is why now we have a God that is way in heaven. He's everything but where we are. And he's anyone but us. And even a different species, like I'm in this world but not of this world. So where are you from?
Yeah.
Like that's the ultimate act of separatism right there, when you say I'm not of something, seeing that you're supposed to be everything. Wasn't that you just said God was everything? So do you see how if you choose to believe in it, and this is what many people have found themselves in the trap, if you try to make sense of foolishness, that's why they always say man's wisdom is foolishness to God. God, again, being the supreme or apex human being. Then you start to see that all these are riddles where they're really telling the truth, but you would need to dig a little bit deeper into the actual literal meaning, meaning of the words, actually transcending something more than just the literal text, but transcending into something that is the real spiritual connection. And then that gets us into the next subject. That gets us into how is it that, okay, all of what you're saying sounds great. You're basically saying that man and woman are universes and that we've been duped because we've accepted language and many other things that have disempowered us. Okay. But how is it working under the framework of them being able to contrive such a myth and keep it going for so long? Like, how is it working? And so we find that there are oaths, bindings, pacts, and rituals taking place all the time that we're agreeing to. And a major part of that starts, of course, when we're younger, especially just in school. So we see the right hand is placed over the heart. This is the beginning of the ritual. And one is to skip over things lightly, but yeah, man, there's no time limits.
Oh yeah, no, that's great, and I love when someone gets passionate and goes on. I mean, I'm a student of learning too, and I'm just loving this because my mind's going in all kinds of directions. So this is great. One of the things I wanted to bring up, I guess, talking about the pentagram, was that I've always just seen it as a symbol, but it's, I guess what you're saying is it's how that symbol is used. I mean, and maybe we can get more specific because there's people that would say, okay, well, if you have the 3 points of the pentagram pointing upwards, then the symbol is, of course, a positive symbol. But then when you have it inverted, as in Luciferianism, Satanism, or whatever, then you have the inverted pentagram, which everybody thinks of as being the negative, right? So
Right.
maybe we can dissect that a little bit more, because maybe that's just basic.
Let me elaborate on that, because that's exactly what I was talking about with these one-line explanations that these new people are giving, and they have no clue of what they're talking about as far as what it's really about, right? Because think about it. Now, the geometry based on it is 72 degrees. Like when you look at the distance between each line in the star is 72 degrees. It's 5 of them, so when you take 72 degrees times 5, you get 360. So that's 360 degrees, a perfect circle. So somehow this becomes a straight line way of making a circle, which is sometimes known as squaring the circle. It's finding ways to trap something that is already superfluous. Like, remember, everything that's related to nature doesn't build in straight lines. Auric fields, everything that's connected with the higher states of consciousness as far as light waves and spectrums concerned, are moving like cones and spirals and things of that nature. They don't have straight lines. So in every tense, what we're talking about with this symbol is we're talking about, again, volumes of information. But what we're also saying is that notice how it connects more than it does with a perfect circle than it with phi, excuse me. This is the quotient of math that is supposed to produce the most puzzling riddles, okay? And this is because if you think about the human being is the quotient that produces the most puzzling riddles. So you see how they start already tying this symbol into man, that which is what Da Vinci drew out. He was closed-lipped because he had already discovered it, what was going on, and why they were utilizing this particular symbol, because they had come into the knowledge of how to put spirits into fleshly vehicles. This wasn't this was PlayStation for these ancient beings. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They were already figuring out, like, how did you get the goat? How did you get the dog? How did you get all of these different entities, and what made them in these different measures? And that's what the secret of the Sphinx is. The 4 elements is in the riddle of the Sphinx. So when you see the different composite beings that are there, they symbolize the 4 elements. Now, you see this 4 elements also with the 4 angels: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the Kaaba, the Tetragrammaton. All of these different traditions that you see in what is the religious structure of today are based on the 4 fathers, or that structure of 4, or what is also known as the door. As you see, they rhyme. So this is how you can start to take, if you really understand numbers, if you really understand these letters for what they are, you could take them completely apart and basically reverse engineer exactly how this particular reality was created. So then when you know the way in, you also know the way out. So to me personally, there's nothing that I really shy away from as far as understanding it. But that doesn't mean that I got to go and worship it and draw it on the ground and do all sorts of weird stuff with it, because now you're into the external version. And this is the main thing that we're dealing with here. So if I tell you that I can take this thing down and bring it back up in 3 days, or meaning that I can actually go into a state of meditation, that I would completely dissolve most of my identification with self, and then completely re-access another side, a more harmonic side of myself, then that starts to make sense more so than some external character that is actually leaving it, coming and going in and out of worlds to save helpless beings. And so you can see how the entire structure, again, of religion is built to disempower by first introducing the character known as God. Once we're looking outside for something, again, that's inside, that's the first level of disempowerment. So once again, we have still, more so than spiritual entities, physical men that have aligned themselves with perpetuating this lie of who we are. And hopefully, again, in this conversation also, since we don't have really any time limits, I get to a point where I transcend even that I'm talking on this microphone and that we're recording and whatever. And we can start getting into, just as we're talking as friends, because realistically, I would speak directly to you rather than anyone that I can't see. Those are fans and viewers and things like that. I don't know who would see, so I can't picture them. That's in the future. But right now with you, I would be interested in giving you the information so that you know. Now, first of all, let's talk about merging senses, how to actually become this hyperdimensional super conscious being. The first thing you're going to need to do is, now, you can remember things that have happened in the past when you were a child. right? And then even if you go to be something like, let's say, an architect, and you start designing a building, you can visualize that building and what it's supposed to be. And then as it gets built, it will, in the future, it will eventually be a building, okay? So this shows you that the past and the future can be actually collapsed into the present if you knew that there's no such thing as time. So that means that even the energy that you would gain 100 parsecs from now, you actually have access to right now, as long as you can collapse the fields of time. Now, the fields of time are actually like bands or layers. This is kind of synonymous with Saturn's rings. You see this continuous rings around that. It's called a girdle, right? And in many tenses, the languages are like rings. That's why they call it the Lord of the Rings. There's the Elven script, which is really Sanskrit, written over the ring. Because